move forward to next item is an invocation. Delegate Jimmy Gill here. So 하면 저 speaker. Delegate Jimmy Gill here.
Okay, yate me Lasita. Here yate been Budget Finance Committee. Good morning. Today is June 21st, 2022. As regular meeting, I'd like to do an invocation very small and here this Nakanadan this code nothing your cartoon the other yat 8 of home. The number based upon it in the question educate about it on a Kodoi 2024 Son Kodo. The agenda and capacity legislation the Kodo. The number 8 in the OU is around the corner. It's in a hot echo. Yat in a hot click on the yat echo. Kodo. The causes is that the Belgi now echo needs and Halat or in him, other Ines, others unpack the whole thing. Here in the corner, each debtor is not that this kid are such in young that age, it's not the Hadalia. Does link could all is not launching on here that he are not this day. A genre, has not clean on the Aron the top and need then she in the here in and he taught us a bring in the hot take the hidden net hope. Trago a comfortable trouser or things that need. Aron the compact get us at our teeth at not then when the with Aron the Conhere legislation 86-22 8 or Unalia not all year in that able had it off. General car dealer he's not he saw that a capacity Pilot hidden by it and laid headed out either. Our Navajo Nation government yard a to yard has out on this. Only Kagi are on the President Nashi negotiating one on the squad. Decision or he will need to catch up a lot of work out on the legislative officer. Mr. Dean, Councilman Nick Linney, here, Speaker and Linney Navajo Nation Council Yaki. Yet it of staff is also yet because RL and the change Chief Justice Judicial Branch now it as Cajun now it as it on the peacemaking that ego. General in her rush at the English card and general I don't know other than her deal up on that a call that up President Staff Division Director General that English could on later. Yet on the back, Chekudo, Koda Aya, Kid on the Budget Finance Committee, led to process these legislation, which is very important to our corner, and the corner reported that a art from Hobby, because it lead or the Hajan or Liquidate, that is tried on card or tradition, Hajan or Liquidate, Hajan lead on the article of Nakus needed. Generously. Amen.
Good shake last Shina the Jim Delegate Jim Gill here and General Hatsadins by Kahla. I'm checking another has 20 Janito Virginia. With that, I can't Ada Kodoya Nasoy recognizing guests and visiting officials. ADGA Kodoshnanda Delegate Shinanda Delegate Elmer PBG.
Oh, I'm calling in.
Sorry. For the record, Delegate Elmer PBG just joined us. Craggy, he's with Ramona. If you have that for the record, we have Delegate Elmer PBG with us right now.
Yes, I've got that, Chairman.
Thank you. So we have 6 members present. With that, we have next item is recognizing guests of visiting officials. And as Budget and Finance Committee, I don't know. We do have several new callers on the line listening in, wondering what kind of business BNF is taking up today. So with that, Delegate Vice Chair Smith, introduction. Vice Chair Smith. Let's move forward. Delegate Jimmy Ely here in the shot. Let's see to the audience that's listening in.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Jimmy L here in Seattle, Chimbagadi, Nasado, Kono Budget for Finance Committee, Aja Kaya, Nastaho, Kakona del Tito, and Hitato. Bahosiani, anyway, don't let not on in Slingy Koto, Jimmy Black Mesa, the force late of the Gaba, Hot on Penny on, was studied top of on the Terrell Tony, harder, Yate Penny on not not on and Lenny. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, here last Delegate Yellow here. Next, Delegate Amber Knasbakrati.
Yappy Chairman Penio, this is Delegate Crotty. I'm going to have to excuse myself as we're getting ready to be on our flight to Washington, D.C. But Sheikh Ani Nishka do the Lagana Bashichin, Destiny the Shekado, the Lagana Deshinale. I represent Chief Queen, Sugar Hill, Solina, Kanaki, Red Valley, Cove, Gadiai, Pabato, the Northern Agency on the Budget and Finance Committee, but we represent all of our beautiful people. So Chair, and we're just grateful for the moisture, and I appreciate the prayer. Chiaj, Delegate Yellowhair. Thank you.
For your introduction and safe travels this morning, and so noted you are excused from today's meeting, Shinanda. With that, moving forward to Shinanda, Delegate Nathaniel Brown.
Hey, Ben, can you guys hear me?
Oh.
Delegate Brown here. Say, Hoba Hanslon, look, Assishin, Kiani, that's a chair, that's a plan of the Sanala. And, Kia Quagaya, the Ne, Bana, said the Nebana, Sanigaya, Chechin beat Hodo, Danaho, so other Twitter nation, or K into Township. So, the great morning from Fight August lead from all roads lead to Chaco meeting here. Navajo economic development by Adel Kikuda. So yeah, thank you, Chair.
For introductions, Delegate Nathaniel Brown. Delegate Elmer P. Begay.
Yeah, there's around the members of the Budget and Finance Committee. Around the staff, Lenidot, Shagwedot, Mustakai, other stages dot people that are on the line, so I had no yet been conditions. So you know, I don't actually not as a couple. So put it in the position. Sit not in the shade class shade smell. That is a representing fortune for the other today, around the 18.2. Other party later is in the Wells. Around the back about Kate, a white cone. I don't know. There was we toy Chris with the Banas. Yeah.
Delegate Elmer P. Begay for your introduction. Last Vice Chair Smith. Vice Chair Smith, are you there? Okay, with that, let's move forward to Shay Jamie Hino Shija. The Lachinde Nasha. Lachinde Toji late dot is so other but the Shahako. I chair the Budget and Finance Committee. Listening to the Chini was a chain talk it leans it say that. Too much additionally that code I need 8,000 deep in Although we have two staff in kind in the chair. I don't need to 8,000 Miss Peggy Nakai.
Oh, yate bene Shay Peggy Nakai and Chia, Legislative Advisor in Schlindy Budget and Finance Committee, Ishnashnish. The Bethlehem in Shlon had soy Bashin, Torichini Dashichedo, Tachini Dashanala, Lake in Hojonde Nasha. Let's see. I also work with the State Task Force for the Navigator Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Mr. Mona Nelson.
Oh, Chairman and Budget and Finance Committee members, Shay Ramona Nelson, Dashine, not Otna Tochin, Shno, Hanagani, Bashin, Zatanidas Chasing, the Chanela, Legislative Assistant A, Shlom Budget and Finance Committee, Bakan Shwa. Say a Tode, Yaside Nasha, Cat.
Thank you, Ramona, for your introduction. So with that, moving forward to our visiting guests, Nichida Dalsi, as a BNF committee and our staff, Kadeya Kodoya, Nomination Executive Branch under President Nez. Are there any representatives from the executive branch? So nobody from the executive branch. So let's move forward to nomination judicial branch. Any representatives from judicial branch?
Good morning, Chair and members of the Budget and Finance Committee. This is Karen Francis.
Good morning, Karen. Thank you for your introduction to the audience here. Thank you for the record. Nomination legislative branch, Speaker Damon's office, staff.
Good morning, Chair. Yate Bennett. Good morning, committee. This is Donovan from Speaker's office.
Thank you, Donovan, for being on the call with us. Thank you. With that, moving forward to nomination chapter governments. Any chapter nomination chapter on the line. Let's move forward to Shananda Ishmael on the 24th Nomination Council. Any nomination council delegates on the line? Okay, so let's move forward.
Chair, this is Kristen Lowell. I'm with the Department of Justice. Sorry, I missed your call for the executive.
Okay, the Nomination Department of Justice, Ms. Kristen Lowell. Is there anybody else from DOJ?
Adjoa is listening for part of the discussion as well.
Okay, thank you for your introduction and acknowledgement for being on the record. Nomination Office of Legislative Counsel, Sean.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. This is Lurleen with OLC.
Thank you, Mr. Pahi, for being on the call with us. Thank you. With that, let's move forward to review and adopt the agenda. Peggy, if you would read the agenda to the record for us, please.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the Budget and Finance Committee. The proposed agenda of the Budget and Finance Committee of the Navajo Nation Council, June 21, 2022, regular meeting via teleconference. Presiding is Jamie Henio, Chairperson, Raymond Smith Jr., Vice Chairperson. Place via telecommunications, Window Rock, Navajo Nation. 1, call the meeting to order, the roll call, the invocation. 2, recognize guests and visiting officials. 3, review and adopt the agenda. 4, review and adopt the journal, May 17th, 2022. And then 5, receive reports. Excuse me. A, FRF update presented by Tom Patero, Director, Fiscal Recovery Fund Office. B, update on the FY23 budget process presented by Dominic Bial, Director, Office of Management and Budget. And then C, update on the ARPA Hardship Assistance Program presented by Elizabeth Begay, Interim Controller, Office of the Controller. 6, old business done. 7, new business. A, legislation number 0102-22, an act relating to the Budget and Finance Committee for fiscal year 2023, accepting the Navajo Nation's general fund revenue projection and the 3 branch chiefs' recommended budget planning allocations, approving the budget calendar and budget instructions manual, and other actions related to the Navajo Nation's comprehensive budget for FY 2023, sponsored by Jamie Henio and Wilson Stewart Jr., council delegates. B is scheduling the second meeting of July 19, 2022. 8, close of the session, written announcements, adjournment. Chair.
Thank you for that reading. With that, is there a motion to accept the agenda as read? Is there a motion?
Delegate Yellowhair, motion.
Delegate Jimmy Yellowhair, motion. Is there a second? Is there a second? Going once? There's a motion to accept the agenda as read. Is there a second? Going twice? Is there a second to accept the agenda as read? Motion by Delegate Jimmy Yellowhair. Going 3 times.
Chair, this is Delegate Cardi. If I'm in order, I can second. I'm still able to be on the call for a few more minutes.
Thank you for that second. So we do have a motion and a second on the floor for accepting the agenda as read. With that, let's move forward to questions, comments on the agenda. Any comments or questions from the Budget and Finance Committee? Hearing none, if there are no questions or comments on the agenda.
Chairman.
Move forward to roll call vote. Motion Delegate Jimmy Yellowhair. Come on the agenda.
Oh, yeah, not today. Legislation number 0102-22. It said that the license has been a floor rules on that one, but basically it depends on our vote. It or my my motion. Like even to yeah.
Delegate Jimmy O'Hare motions to amendment number 1. Is to go to legislation 10222 first under new business item, which is 7A. From there, going back to reports 5A, B, C. Motion is there a second on amendment number 1? Is there a second on amendment number 1, sponsored by Jimmy Yellowhair? Amendment number 1, sponsored by Delegate Jimmy Yellowhair. Is there a second? Going once? Amendment number 1, sponsored by Delegate Jimmy Yellowhair. Is there a second? Going twice?
Delegate Brown.
Delegate Nathaniel Brown, second. So we do have a motion and a second for amendment number 1, which is to go to item 7A, new business item first, after adopting the journal, then after that going back to receiving reports. So with that, we do have a motion and a second. So with that, any comments or questions on amendment number 1? I'm not hearing any. So if there's no questions or comments, we'll do a roll call vote. Ramona, lead us a roll call
Mr.
vote
Chair,
for amendment number 1.
Mr. Chair, this is Lurleen with OLC.
For on amendment number 1?
Yes.
Okay, Mrs. Tabahi.
There are a few amendments that I would need to work on. So I'm just letting you know that if legislation is first, that's gonna make it difficult for me to get the amendments ready right away. But of course, it's up to the committee what the committee wishes to do on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pai, for that. With that, Ramona, if you would lead us a roll call vote for amendment number 1.
Sure, Chairman Heaney, a roll call vote for the amendment. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote? Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote? Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair, how do you vote? Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair, how do you vote? Honorable Amber Kenneth-Bockrati, how do you vote? Honorable Amber Kenneth-Bockrati, how do you vote? Honorable Elmer P. Begay, how do you vote? Honorable Elmer P. Begay, how do you vote? Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote?
Delegate Brown votes green.
Thank you. Honorable Brown votes green. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote? Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair, how do you vote?
I'll vote green. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair votes green. Honorable Amber Kenneth-Bockrati, how do you vote? Honorable Elmer P. Begay, how do you vote? Chairman, we have 2 members voting in the affirmative, 3 members not voting. Chairman not voting. Chairman?
Chair Heaney, this is Peggy.
Okay, with that, we do have 2 in favor, 0 opposed, chair not voting. Ramona, if you at least, we don't have a quorum at this time.
Chair Heaney,
So therefore, we need to do an official roll call again. Peggy?
we do have Elmer Begay votes green and Vice Chair Smith votes green.
White text?
Yes.
Kashina. With that, Ramona?
Yes, Chairman.
The vote? Tally count.
Sure. The count for the motion of the amendment. So we have Raymond Smith Jr. voting via text in the affirmative. Jimmy Yellowhair voting in the affirmative. Amber Kenneth-Bockrati is not voting. Elmer P. Begay voting via text, and Honorable Nathaniel Brown voting in the affirmative. So we have 4 members voting in the affirmative.
Okay.
I will
with that,
agree with Doug.
4 in favor, 0 opposed, chair not voting. Amendment number 1 carries. So with that, we're back on the main motion, Shananta, Budget Finance Committee. Any further questions, comments on the agenda? Main motion.
Chairman.
Delegate Jamil here.
Anidi, yes, it's Celeste Kodoni, Chahanati, our legislative council. Ila ayat or be got a non Chakati, Aya Akoton, Natlan, Sahonan sauce. Bahata Tani quest at the Zinarish. Salit Elanson, or that's my waste of time. That's Salit Elanson, creditor. The legal counseling state. We're not ready other lacking darkness that Chairman. How's that situation now with this? Do we just approve a legislation 0102-22? The question I think is Chairman.
Delegate Neal here. We voted on amendment number 1. So the committee voted to move forward with your motion, which is to
Okay.
hear legislation first. If it was a concern, I wish you would have pulled your motion back and we could have went through the agenda as read. But we did vote for amendment number 1, I thought, so we're back on the main motion. Any questions, comments on the main motion? Then we have 1 amendment to the main motion. And AA is to move with 7A, legislation 102-22 first, and then go to reports. So with that, on the main motion, Ramona, if there are no further questions, comments on the main motion, Ramona, lead us to roll call vote.
Sure, Chairman, can you roll call vote on the main motion? Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote?
Chair, this is Delegate Brown with a question.
Hold on, Ramona. Delegate Nathaniel Brown. Delegate Brown.
Correct?
What's that?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Oh.
Okay, I have a really cheap $15 earphone. It's not working really well, I guess. I can hear you, but my question is, are we voting on the main for legislation 0102-22? And if so, do we still need to accept them or introduce the amendment? It should not.
Delegate Nathaniel Brown, we are still on approving the agenda, and we are on the main motion, voting on the main motion for the agenda. After this, then we'll be moving forward to adopting the journal. Though after that, and then we'll be going to the action item for 102-22. Delegate Nathaniel Brown. Delegate Brown, are you there? Delegate Nathaniel Brown, are you still with us? Okay, with that, let's move forward to the roll call vote for accepting the agenda with 1 amendment. Ramona, you would start the roll call again.
Roll call vote on accepting the agenda. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote?
Green.
Thank you. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr. votes green. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair, how do you vote? Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair, how do you vote? Honorable Amber Kenneth Carty, how do you vote? Honorable Amber Kenneth Carty. Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote?
Delegate Brown votes green.
Thank you. Honorable Nathaniel Brown votes green. Honorable Elmer P. Begay, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you. Honorable Elmer P. Begay votes green. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair votes green. Chairman, we have 4 members voting in the affirmative, 0 opposing. Chairman not voting, and one member not voting. Chairman?
Thank you for the roll call vote. 4 in favor, 0 opposed. Chair not voting. We have accepted our agenda. With that, Budget and Finance Committee. Let's move forward to the next item on the approved agenda. Review and adopt journals for May 17th, 2022. I believe they were emailed to us, right, Ramona?
Yes, Chairman Hinu, those were emailed to the Budget and Finance Committee members.
Kashina, thank you. With that, is there a motion to accept the journals?
Delegate Yellowhair motion.
Kashina, Delegate Jimmy, you'll hear a motion. Is there a second?
Vice Chair Smith.
Second by Vice Chair Smith. With that, any questions, comments on the journal? Let's move forward to accepting the journals. With that, Ramona, if you would lead us a roll call vote.
Sure, Chairman Hinu, roll call vote on accepting the journals. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote?
3.
Thank you. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr. votes green. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair, how do you vote?
I vote green. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair votes green. Honorable Amber Kenneth Carty, how do you vote? Honorable Amber Kenneth Carty, how do you vote? Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote?
Delegate Brown votes in favor.
Thank you. Honorable Nathaniel Brown votes in favor. Honorable Elmer P. Begay, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you. Honorable Elmer P. Begay votes green. Chairman, we have 4 members voting in the affirmative, 0 opposing. Chairman not voting, and 1 member not voting. Chairman?
Chair Hinu.
Yes, with that, Peggy?
Thank you. For today, Delegate Amber Crotty is excused. So just
I
note
made
that
that
for the
notation.
record.
I made that notation. Thank you, Peggy, for reminding us. Ramona, did you get that?
Yes, Chairman. So for the main motion vote, Amber Kenneth Carty is excused. So there was 4 members voting in the affirmative and Chairman not voting. Chairman?
Thank you. With that, we do have, what was the count? 4 in favor? 0 opposed?
Yes, Chairman, 4 in favor and 0 opposed.
So with that, we have accepted the journals for May 17, 2022. Moving forward on our agenda, as we have approved it. Next item is legislation 102-22, sponsored by myself, Peggy.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Who made the motion for the adopting the journal, please?
Ramona?
Yes, the main motion is from Jimmy Yellowhair and second from Raymond Smith Jr. And the vote was 4-0. Chairman not voting and Amber Kenneth Carty excuse.
Thank you.
Kashina, with that, moving forward, Vice Chair Smith, are you with us? Still with us?
I'm still here with you, Shenandoah Donaldson.
If you would, I'll hand the gavel over to you. I'm sponsoring this legislation that's coming up before the committee now.
Thank you, Chair Henio and committee members of the Budget Finance. Good morning. It's going to be the longest day of the year, so I'd like to call upon the legislation 0102-22. Could we have that read into the record? We have a sponsor with us this morning, Honorable Chair Henio. Could we have that legislation read into the record?
Yes, Vice Chair Smith. Just to let you know, there are two amendments that are being proposed. And so the Legislative Council is requesting to discuss those amendments before they finalize the amendments. So this is a proposed standing committee resolution. Budget and Finance Committee has final authority. It's introduced by Jamie Henio, Chairman Henio, and he did sign as the primary sponsor. The co-sponsor is Wilson C. Stewart Jr. Tracking number 0102-22, an act relating to the Budget and Finance Committee for fiscal year 2023, accepting the Navajo Nation's general fund revenue projection and the three branch chiefs' recommended budget planning allocations, approving the budget calendar and the budget instructions manual and other actions related to the Navajo Nation's comprehensive budget for FY 2023. So the attachments that are referenced in the legislation are there. The Exhibit A through 1 is the revenue projection. Exhibit B is the fiscal year 2023 permanent fund income available for general fund and expenditure plan. Exhibit C is the three branch chiefs agreement. And then Exhibit D is the draft fiscal year 2023 budget instructions manual. And that consists of several pages up to 165 pages. Thereafter, you have a copy of the budget preparation calendar, Exhibit E. Exhibit F is the allocation 23 million FY 2023 projected recovery of IDC funds. And so that's Exhibit F. And then you have Legislative Council's memo and the Internet Public Review publication, and there were no comments received. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Shetta, for reading that into the record. Committee members of Budget and Finance Committee, Ocean.
Elder Yeller, motion.
I recognize Honorable Yellow Hair, motioning party. Second.
Henio.
Second to this legislation is Honorable Chair Henio. Committee members, we have a motion and a second in place. Chair Henio, you have the floor. We'll give you 20 minutes. If you need to use all 20 minutes, that'd be fine. If not, then we can go into questions. And I don't know if you have any agents with you. I'll turn the floor over to you, Chair Henio.
Vice Chair Smith for taking over the meeting for this legislation. And with this legislation, Iggy, this is our annual exercise, which leads to the beginning of the annual budget process, which is approving the budget instruction manual. And so therefore, this legislation is a result of all the office of the controller during their conducting the projected annual income amounts for the general funds. And so with that, we also have the Office of Management Budget, Mr. Dominic Bial, involved in this whole process as far as their office actually putting the budget instruction manual together along with Department of Justice and Office of Legislative Counsel, and therefore all the staff that had a role in this. Thank you for bringing this before the committee here. And I understand there are some amendments that need to be entertained, which is the Office of Legislative Counsel is working on. So with that, Chair, Vice Chair Smith, if I may, Mr. Dominic Bial, are you on the call with us? Mr. Dominic Bial?
Mr. Chair, I am here.
If you would, I'll yield the floor to you to provide some background information on the budget instruction manual. And then we can move from there. As far as the three-branch chiefs agreement is also part of the BIM. So this, Vice Chair, if I may, I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Bial to provide some background information.
You may have the floor. Just for future reference, if I lose on the phone here, I'm having little problems. Could Honorable Jimmy O'Hare take over till I get back on the line? To have little difficulties. You may proceed, Mr. Dominic Bial.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee and all of the listening audience. As Chair Henio stated, this particular legislation that's before you today, once it's approved, will officially launch and start the annual budgeting process for fiscal year 2023, which would take effect on this coming October 1st. So it took a lot of work to get the information from the controller's office and then various other offices to get the revenues identified, and then to get the various rates and schedules that would apply to 23. So finally, on June 7th, which was your last meeting of the BNF committee, we were hopeful at the time of having the legislation being considered by the committee. However, the only matter that was lacking was the branch chief's agreement. And the way the legislation was drafted, it would make the branch chief's agreement, once done, to be appended as an exhibit. So because that matter hadn't been done yet, that's what delayed it to today. Anyway, in the meantime, on June 12th, which is a Sunday, the branch chiefs did meet in Albuquerque. And there was discussion about the budget, some of the issues, concerns, where the funds are changing. and so forth. Ultimately, because the branch chiefs realize that the budget process needs to get underway, they reached an agreement, and that agreement was prepared and eventually signed off by all three branch chiefs. So what the branch chiefs agreement, maybe most importantly, what it does is that it identifies or recommends the planning allocation amounts for the various categories, such as fixed costs, external fund, cash match, the three branches, chapter non-administrative, and this time there's a new set aside, which is for the chapter official stipends. Now that's new because of the continuing concern year after year that the chapter officers' stipends was being underfunded, which caused, during the course of the year, additional appropriations to be made by supplemental to cover the difference. So this time around, the branch chiefs agreed to set aside the amount necessary for the statutory mandated meetings. So you'll see that figure in the both the branch chiefs agreement and then in the legislation. Now, moving on to the BIM that's appended, see as Exhibit D, is the version we would use fiscal year 22 as the base document. And then what we do is, once we prepare an initial draft of the 23 BIM, we send it to a number of entities who contribute to the content and substance of the BIM, such as Department of Personnel Management. They would review the personnel management portion of the BIM. And then DOJ and OOC, they would also review the document. And also to Legislative Council, and then to the three branch chief offices. So that document, they would submit a number of recommended language changes or new provisions and so on. And with that information, OMB would draft the new proposed BIM with the underlines and overstrikes showing where all the changes are. So that's the BIM that's before you. It's a lengthy document, 167 pages, as I remember. But remember, once it's approved in final form, it'll be put on duplex pages, meaning back to back. So it would be roughly about 80 pages long once it's finalized. And once the committee approves it, hopefully today, then we'll work with records management to get it printed as soon as possible. So it could be available tomorrow. If not, then Thursday. So that's the overview. I noticed that Ms. Nakai sent a document to your attention, which we use at the branch chiefs meeting. That just gives an overview and highlights of the budget. Let me just go through it real quick. The revenues that we have available is an increase of $21 million over fiscal year 22. So that's the good news. And then there's a permanent fund interest excess of $27.9 million. So that's the interest over the $40 million for the permanent fund 5-year plan that goes into the general fund for budgeting. So that would be available a little bit down the road. Now, the budget base for 22 was $177.2 million. Now 198. So that's what I mean. There's a $21 million increase. Now, however, there's some offsets. For example, the fixed cost allocations, $23.3 million. That's what's being recommended. That's an increase of $2.4 million. So when you think about the $21 million increase, where we have to fund the fixed costs already out of that increase by $2.4 million. The external fund cash match is being proposed at $5 million. That's an increase of $1.5 million. The indirect cost recovery for 23 is at $23 million, which is $2 million less than this year. Now, what's also important to understand is that the fringe benefits schedule for regular employees, let me just cite that one because that's the biggest one that affects us, the government. It's going up to 43%, up to 52%. So that's almost a 9% increase. And because our general fund budget is approximately 60-70% personnel, that's a rather substantial cost. And then funding the chapter official stipends, as I mentioned, at the mandatory level, resulted in an increase for that particular set aside. So given all this, the branch chiefs met and considered all of this information and reviewed the options that we presented. We presented two options, call them option A and option B. The only difference between the two is the chapter non-administrative costs group. Anyways, the branch chiefs agreed to option A, which is now in their branch chiefs agreement and is in the legislation before the BNF committee, those various amounts. So, members of the committee, Mr. Chair, that's the overview and summary of the legislation before you. Again, the BIM has the overstrikes and underlines. Part of the chapter budgeting procedures were developed by the chapter section of DOJ, chapter unit, Roderick Begay and Company. So, again, Mr. Chair, committee members, that's the overview of the entire legislation that's before you. And I understand, I heard Ms. Nakai say that there's two amendments being prepared. And I'm not sure what they are, but if they come up in the next 30 minutes or so, then that would be entertained, of course, by the committee. Mr. Chair, committee members, that's the overview, summary, highlights of the legislation before you. And thank you very much.
Chair Henry, does that conclude your report or your presentation for this legislation 102?
Yes, Vice Chair Smith. We are, that is the extent of the report for this legislation to the Budget and Finance Committee. But I need to give the floor to, if they have time remaining, to Ms. Kristen Lowell and Ms. Laureline Tapahi to give us information on what amendments that need to be made. So I'll defer to Ms. Kristen Lowell first. Ms. Lowell.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. So these are DOJ's proposed edits, and the bulk of them are what we discussed last time. I did send this document out last night, and so everyone should have it. Ms. Nakai sent it. I sent it to Ms. Nakai, the advisors. I sent it to, I accidentally left off OLC and OMB, so I forwarded it to OLC last Friday just to get their, make sure that they didn't have any issues or concerns, and I forwarded it to OMB this morning. Okay, so we talked last time about potential amendments to the BIM, including chapter officials stipend as fixed costs. OMB, and I certainly invite OMB to explain it from their perspective. They may have a better way of explaining it, since certainly this is their area of expertise. But Mel Rodas, who's not here today, did some work at Chair Henio's request to have chapter official stipends be included in fixed costs. And so DOJ worked on some proposed amendments to the BIM, and that's the bulk of the document that is in front of you. The only other change was just what I believe was a typographical error in Appendix L, which was just needed 22 to be stricken and 23 to be inserted. But let me just go through the highlights of the chapter official stipends and what would need to be amended in the BIM should the committee choose to go in that direction. So the first section that would need to be amended would be Section 9, the chapter budget process, and a new subsection C would be inserted. It would read as follows. Chapter official stipends for the monthly, regular, and chapter planning meetings referenced in the LGA at 26 NNC Section 1002 CB shall be treated as fixed costs. Chapter official stipends for the emergency chapter meetings, special chapter meetings, agency council meetings, district council meetings, and regional council meetings referenced in the BIM Appendix M1, Section 4G2 may be treated as fixed costs. And I note that section of the BIM 4G2 has actually stricken district council meetings and regional council meetings. So if the committee chooses to make this amendment, then we would also strike district council meetings and regional council meetings as well, and then just leave in emergency special chapter meetings and agency council meetings. The next section that would be impacted if the committee chooses to add chapter official stipends to fixed costs would be in the definitions section, which is section Roman numeral 14, 12. And at the end of the paragraph, a change would be inserted that would read as follows. Chapter officials' stipends for the monthly regular chapter and chapter planning meetings referenced in the LGA at 26 NNC section 1002 subsection CB shall be treated as fixed costs, and chapter officials' stipends for the emergency chapter meetings, special chapter meetings, agency council meetings referenced in the BIM Appendix M1 section 4G2 may be treated as fixed costs. And then finally, Appendix M1 section 4G1 and 2 chapter budget policies. In item 1, there'd be an addition. The end of the sentence would be added on, and that would read, I'll just read the whole thing. That'd be easier. Upon receiving notification of the annual base allocation, the chapter shall allocate sufficient funding for stipends of the chapter president, chapter vice president, and chapter secretary treasurer for 12 regular meetings and 12 planning meetings, comma, and the addition would be which are to be budgeted as fixed costs. And then item 2 reads, subsection 2 reads as follows. The chapter may allocate stipends subject to fund availability, comma, may be budgeted as fixed costs, comma, for other meetings in the following order of priority: emergency chapter meetings, special chapter meetings, agency council meetings. And again, the district council meetings and regional council meetings, those have been stricken from the section in the BIM, and that was, as Mr. Bial explained, in conjunction with the chapter unit at the Department of Justice headed by Assistant Attorney General Roderick Begay. And so that is what DOJ worked on, and I certainly invite Mr. Bial, if he has any concerns about that, to present that to the committee so that that can be properly addressed. Thank you, Chair.
Back to Chair Hanyo. Does that conclude your for legislation 0102-22? Committee members, Peggy, do we still have Chair Hanyo online?
Yes,
Chair,
he's muted. He's muted. And once we begin the discussion, I have a question.
Okay. Mr. Smith?
Previous meetings, I told you, or I had requested that possibly meeting with the
Vice Chair Smith, are you still there?
Yes, I am, Chair. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Smith. Mr. Pahi, has she spoken yet?
She hasn't spoken. I was just.
Let's hear from Mr. Pahi regarding this, and once she's done, then I'll yield the floor to you, Shanada, Vice Chair Smith.
Ms. Pahi, you got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So as I had stated back on June 7th at the prior meeting when we discussed these amendments. The main purpose for these proposed amendments to the BIM by the Office of Legislative Counsel is to facilitate and to try to expedite the development of funding legislations. Certain language and certain things we felt needed to be included in the BIM that were not put in that original draft that was sent around. So that's the reason OLC decided to come up with the amendments that, or I call them the edits that we discussed with you at the last meeting. I did send to Peggy the most recent amendments that were developed after the meeting that we had with the committee on June 7th. We did take some of the concerns of the committee and we incorporated changes, further changes to the edits that we presented on June 7th. And those further edits are designed to address some of the concerns of the committee. So I would like to ask Peggy if she can forward those, that draft amendments that I sent to her, if she could send that to you all. And this is what I would propose as an amendment to the legislation that would, it's not an amendment to the body of the legislation, but it's an amendment to Exhibit D. And so if you would like, I can read through the entire document that I have prepared to explain each section to the committee and the reason for the change in each section. I can do that again. I'm going to say about 80% of which I did at the June 7th meeting, but there are, like I said, some minor changes that we did since that meeting. So I would be happy to go through all of these changes in this document, or if the committee just prefers to look at it and read it themselves. Just let me know which you would prefer to do.
And back to Chair Hanio.
That completes the presentation on for legislation 102-22.
Thank you very much for that information, OMB and attorneys, and Chair Hanio for sponsoring this and the co-sponsor. At this point in time, committee members of the Budget and Finance, open the floor for questions, and there's a request for 2 amendments. I'll open the floor for questions.
Vice Chair Hanio, excuse me, Vice Chair Smith, I have a question.
Shada, let me see if any committee members have any questions. Going once, twice, 3 times. Shada, you may have the floor.
Okay, sorry I wasn't clear about what my question was. But anyway, Laureline mentioned that she sent me two emails this morning. And so I saw that they look similar. And so I wasn't too sure. I sent out the one that that she sent out at 11 or 10:44. Is this the one that you're referencing? It says OLC BIM edits. Is that the one? There's another one that you sent previous to that at 10:38, and it says OLC amendments to draft FY23 BIM. Are those the same documents, or I just was wondering on that.
Yes, Peggy, they're the same. The top of the actual attachment, the document, the Word document, says dated 6/8/22 and 6/16/22 after BFC meeting of 6/7. So that's the one that is the most current. And just now, while you were speaking, I sent these in an amendment form as an amendment to legislation 0102-22. So it's an amendment form now.
No, thank you for that. Back to Peggy. Does that clarify your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. So I will be sending out the one that says amendment to 0102-22 in a couple of minutes.
Back to BNF committee members. We had the presentation on the budget instruction manual, and we had OMB, we had the attorneys, and we also had Chair Henyu. Committee members, questions?
Vice Chair Doug McKay.
Coach Da, I recognize you. You have a question? You may have the floor.
Good morning, Yat Ebene. Chair Henyu for presenting this legislation called Yat OMB Dando. Thank you for preparing this budget manual called Kikahado. My question is, I know that my phone dropped for a while, so I didn't really get the whole the presentation. But right now, as you can see, that we're a few weeks behind how it was being scheduled. But I know that there was a question that was brought up, and regarding the three branch chiefs and litigators that have to make an agreement, and how significant was this part of it as a budget manual, starting the whole budget process that seems that it was very significant, or was it really a requirement to have the three branch government to come together and agree on it? There was a whole question about that how did it came about, or can we go without it? But I guess there was an explanation that was brought up before, saying that it did that before, and back in 2016 and so, but it kind of wasn't really good at all. So that's how we understood that. So right now, it seems that was the whole up for up to now. So right now, we got the balance from the. Thanks for that, call. So my question is, right now, is it? Are we on the right schedule of how it should be before back to the regular processes of how these budget formulations, budget orientations, and budget hearings, and all that, the way it's going to be scheduled? Is it are we on the timeline right now? That was my first question. Thank you.
Stop for that question. We'll turn the floor over as soon as Budget Finance Committee members, any other questions regarding the budget instruction manual? Not hearing any, so I'll turn the floor back over to Chair Henyu. There was a question from Honorable Elmer Begay. You have the floor, Chair.
Vice Chair Smith, for The questions and that I'll get Elmer PBG. That I'll defer to my agent, Mr. Dominic Biel.
Mr. Chair, committee members, one of the exhibits to the current legislation before you includes the revised budget calendar timetable. And it's been revised to have the, as I said earlier, the official launching or kickoff of the budget process to be today, which would be the official approval by the BNF committee to accept the legislation and all the figures, amounts, stipulations, and so on and so forth, including the BIM. So the timetable that's appended to the legislation, trying to find it. The way the legislation was constructed this year, the BIM is like in the middle, and there's certain other exhibits attached following it. Usually it's before, just for ease of reading.
Can you hold him on the no, underneath your hand. Oh.
Still scrolling, trying to find it.
Mr. Smith?
Okay, I found it.
Oh.
It's now, the budget calendar is now Exhibit E for the FY23 budget process. And activity or step number 1 is dated today, which would be action by the BNF committee to approve the legislation, the revenues, the planning allocations, the calendar, and the budget instruction manual. And everything else rolls out following all the way through the internal branch allocations and budget preparation, as well as their budget hearings for the branch chiefs, and then finalization of their budgets, which would go to then the oversight committee reviews. And the oversight committees would review and then eventually approve a budget resolution making recommendations to the BNF committee about the their budget matters. The BNF committee would meet August 8th through the 19th. That's when the BNF committee hearings would be. After that would be, of course, the NABI committee, and then the Navajo Nation Council, September 6th through the 9th. This particular date for the council budget session is the typical date, meaning for years now, that's the way it's been done. The requirement per the Appropriations Act is that the council needs to pass the budget legislation no later than 20 days before the fiscal year end. So most years that's September 10th. So this calendar and this activity would meet that requirement. So this particular date, September 6th, would be the day after Labor Day. And then that week, and I understand the fair will be held again for the first time in more than 2 years. So it would be during that same week. Anyway, to again speaking to Delegate Begay's question, this budget calendar has been prepared based on B&F committee acting today. If there's any reason for any delay, then we'll modify it accordingly. And that's what we've been doing for in some of the reports I give into committee. We've been working on all these pieces of the budget, the BIM, the planning amounts, and various amounts for GWA, the personal lapse, the permanent fund interest, and so forth. So anyway, that's the budget calendar as it is laid out in Exhibit E to the budget legislation before you. Mr. Chair, committee members, that's my response. Thank you.
Vice Chair Smith, this is Peggy.
Committee members of the Budget and Finance Committee.
Vice Chair
Back
Smith?
to
That's
Almer
complete.
Begay. Go ahead, Chair Henry.
That completes the response to the question.
Question, thank you. Budget Committee members.
Vice Chair Smith.
Any questions? Not hearing any, so I'll turn the floor over to Shada. Go ahead, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm just asking on behalf of Dana Bobroff, if she'd like to address the subject at hand.
I'll go shoot Shada. I'll turn the floor over to Chair Henry. I'll give you the floor.
Vice Chair, Delegate Begay.
Vice Chair Smith, I defer to Delegate Begay first, and then I'll come back to me.
I'll go shoot Chair Henry. Honorable Almer Begay, you have the floor. Stop.
I think Dana's gonna maybe she's gonna add some more. Maybe after that, I'll ask a question again. Is that okay?
Oh, Dana, are you on the line?
I am. Thank you, Vice Chair and Budget and Finance Committee members. I just wanted to emphasize that the three-branch agreement, that is a recommendation on the allocations between the branches. And I just want to emphasize, because the matter seems to come up in discussions, that the three-branch chief agreement, it is a recommendation. The Budget and Finance Committee can follow the recommendation, they can follow parts of the recommendation, or they can ignore it completely and do their own allocations. So that's all I wanted to do, is make sure that that was very clear to the Budget and Finance Committee, that the three-branch, it's a recommendation. Thank you for giving me the floor. That's all I had to say at the moment. So thank you.
No, thank you, Dana, for that info. Back to Honorable Almer Begay. You have the floor.
Thank you for that, Sita. And then there's one of the questions that I was waiting for Dana to. Thank you, Dana, for explaining that to us again, and then also to Mr. Biel too. So I guess that was what I was. My first question was to see if we do it today, approved by BNF and all that budget calendar, how it's going to go through, and that on a timely manner, how it's going to be very according to the schedule, according to the calendar. I think we need to go by that, and then then get into the day of case. So I think we have to do it today and approve it today, and then we'll be starting the budget session for Budget and Finance Committee. So yeah, my question is being answered.
Committee members of Budget Finance, any further questions? We have a couple of amendments that needs to be entertained before we do vote on the main motion. Committee members. Ramona, do you have access to the phone calls? Are we still on? We still have a quorum?
Vice Chairman, I can do a roll call if that's what you'd like.
Yes, please. I don't hear anybody except Honorable Elmer Begay.
Okay, Vice Chairman, roll call for the Budget and Finance Committee of the Navajo Nation Council. Honorable Jamie Hinyo.
I'm present.
Thank you. Honorable Jamie Hinyo is present. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr.
Present.
Thank you. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr. is present. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair.
I'm present.
Thank you. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair is present. Honorable Elmer P. Begay. Honorable Elmer P. Begay.
I'm present.
Thank you. Honorable Elmer P. Begay is present. Honorable Amber Kenneth-Bott Carty is excused. Honorable Nathaniel Brown.
Delegate Brown votes in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Nathaniel Brown is present. Chairman, Vice Chairman, we have 5 members present upon roll call, 1 member excused. Vice Chairman.
Thank you. Back to committee members. I appreciate that, Shanella, for roll call. Committee members, we have legislation in front of us. There was talk about possible amendments, and we're now at the point in time for questions, and amendments can be entertained at this point in time. Committee members. Not hearing any, so we'll turn the floor back over to Chair Henyo. Chair Henyo, do you have any further information before we proceed?
Yes, I have the amendment. Shananta, Vice Chair Smith, before me right now. I'm reading it from OLC, Office of Legislative Counsel, and if we could get the amendment from the Department of Justice regarding chapter stipends, that way we can move on both amendments. Shananta, Vice Chair Smith.
Agushi, thank you for that clarification. Shananda for the amendments. Committee members, we're relying on a member to entertain a motion and a second on the amendments that are pending.
Delegate Begay.
Honorable Begay, you have the floor.
I'm trying to download that amendment, but I'll go ahead and make the motion to make the amendment number 1 on the chapter official stipend.
I'll recognize your motion for the chapter stipends for the chapters. Motion on Amendment 1.
Mr.
Second.
Chair?
Delegate Yellowhair, second.
We have a second by Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair. May we have the amendment read into record? We kind of just backwards. Can we have the amendment read into record? We already have a motion and second for record purposes.
Okay, Vice Chair. The amendment that is the chapter amendment is labeled Amendment 2, but it becomes Amendment 1 just so that people don't get confused. Okay, so we will read that it says amend Exhibit D as follows. 1, Section 19, chapter budget process. Excuse me, Section 14, chapter budget process, insert new subsection C as follows. C, this is new language, chapter official stipends. Chapter official stipends for the monthly regular chapter and chapter planning meetings referenced in the LGA at 26 NNC section 1002CB shall be treated as fixed costs. Chapter official stipends from the emergency chapter meetings, special chapter meetings, and agency council meetings referenced in the BIM Appendix M-1, Section 4G2 may be treated as fixed costs. 2, Section 14.12, fixed costs. Make the changes as indication below. 12, fixed costs. All costs not allocable to a Navajo Nation central government unit. These costs are incurred for the operation of the overall Navajo Nation government and exclude capital fixed costs. Fixed costs generally include outlays for insurance, utilities, rent, debt service, and other commitments. Such costs do not include personnel, travel, contributions, etc., that are not deemed fixed cost expenses because they are regular program operating expenses. New language, chapter official stipends for the monthly regular chapter and chapter planning meetings referenced in the LGA at 26 NNC section 1002CB shall be treated as fixed costs, and chapter official stipends for the emergency chapter meetings, special chapter meetings, and agency council meetings referenced in the BIM Appendix M-1, Section 4G2 may be treated as fixed costs. 3, Appendix M1, Section 4G1 and 2, chapter budget policies. Make the changes as indicated below. 1, upon receiving notification of the annual base allocation, the chapter shall allocate sufficient funding for stipends of the chapter president, chapter vice president, and chapter secretary treasurer for number 12, and then regular meetings, and 12, number 12, planning meetings, and this is underscored language, which are to be budgeted as fixed costs. 2, the chapter may allocate stipends subject to funds availability, and there's a new comma, and underscored language may be budgeted as fixed costs, comma, and then existing language for other meetings and the following order of priority. And there's a list. A, emergency chapter meetings. B, special chapter meetings. C, agency council meetings. And then D is overstricken, which is district council meetings. E is overstricken, regional council meetings. Note the strike throughs in D and E above are in the FY 2023 as distributed by OMB. 4, Appendix L, Section 1A, make the following change. A, reporting ERFs. For budget planning purposes, reporting is required for ERFs that will be available for expenditure during the Navajo Nation's NN FY 2023. It should read rather than 2023. 2022, excuse me. So the 3 is underscored, the 2 is overstricken, including carryover funds, unexpended budget on existing awards and anticipated new awards. The Appropriations Act requires development of the annual Navajo Nation comprehensive budget to show the overall budget the Navajo Nation will operate with, including in general funds and ERFs. The reporting of ERFs is based on this budgeting process. So that's the Amendment 1. Vice Chair.
Okay, Sheriff, for reading that into the record, we have a motion by Honorable Elmer Begay, second by Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair on Amendment 1. I'll open the floor for questions. Budget and Finance Committee members, any questions on this amendment?
Chair, Vice Chair Dr. Begay.
Honorable Elmer Begay, I'll recognize you. You have the floor.
Yeah, none to the Vice Chair. I know that Chair Henry, other than Chair Peggy, I think there was a question that was brought up. I don't know that it might be for Laura Lane from Legislative Council or to Mr. BL. It's regarding that there's this amendment. There's a grazing committee and then also farm board committee that is not included in this amendment. Necessary to add on today, or they're different? Can you maybe give us some guidance? Yeah, how we can take care of that? That the two officials that are elected officials too. So that we Chair, Vice Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, staff, for asking that question. Before I turn the floor back over to the sponsor of this legislation, and there's agents in Department of Justice and OMB that may be able to provide that answer to you, Shita. Committee members, any further questions regarding Amendment 1? Not hearing any requests for being recognized, I'll turn the floor over to Chair Henyo. Who do you want to have answer that question for Honorable Elmer Begay?
Vice Chair Smith. With that issue, that's always been an issue with is our land board and grazing committee officers and farm board, but that's under the direction of the Department of Agriculture, as they take care of that function. So the way I look at it is that it's sort of it puts us in a position where that we're pretty much have to work with Department of Agriculture and have them let go of that function, and then that way it could become part of any amendments that we make, I believe, because for me, I'll admit I'm not sure how they are paid. I don't know if they get they're paid by, I think they have a salary, but I'll defer that to Department of Justice or Mr. Bial. But that's pretty much my take on the question here, including them. But right now, I feel that it's easier path just to concentrate on the chapter officials first, because that has always been an issue every year, ever since I've been with council, that they've always had the funding shortfall, and they've always gone without getting paid for meetings, and therefore hopefully this amendment will be able to fix that. I was hoping I would have had this back in October when I first requested it, but it's finally here, which is good. And so therefore, Ms. Lowell, do you have any other input to the question?
Chair, at this point, and Vice Chair, at this point, I would have to look into the BIM and see if grazing and farm board officials are contemplated somewhere. This was easier because there's two sections, Section M and Section M1, both appendices that deal with chapter officials, and also the section that deals with chapter budgeting policies. I don't think there's anything quite so straightforward that we can just tweak at this moment, but certainly Mr. Bial may have more information as to where that would go in the BIM if appropriate. But Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lowell. Vice Chair, if I may, Mr. Bial.
Yes, you may proceed with OMB, Mr. Bial.
Mr.
Bial, are you still with us?
Yes, I had to unmute myself. Mr. Vice Chair and Chairman Hino, speaking to the question raised by Delegate Begay, the farm boards, land boards, and grazing committees are all budgeted under the Division of Natural Resources. So that's where their budget funds are. And additionally, I would say this is that annually the shortfall that always occurs is the regular chapter official stipends, which is being addressed per this proposed amendment, and also in the resolution in the branch chiefs agreement. So let me comment further. Earlier, when Attorney Kristen Lowell presented and explained the rationale and so forth for her proposed amendment or DOJ's proposed amendment, we were provided a copy of this before, and so when we went through this, we knew that obviously the history background has already been explained, but I'll say it again as a preface to what I'm talking about. For whatever reasons, the chapter official stipends have been underfunded, or anyway, they always face a shortfall. So every year, it seems, for going back 10 years or so, the Navajo Nation Council had to address it by supplemental appropriation from the UUFB to fund the difference. And the council and committees at the time would express their frustration with the executive branch by saying, how come they don't fund it? It should be at least a mandated meetings and so forth. So that was the effort this year, particularly with the increase in the overall revenue, general fund revenue of 21 million. So I know that, a few months ago, we got an inquiry from DOJ saying there was a request from one of the delegates to draft legislation that would make chapter official stipends a fixed cost. And they asked our opinion about it. And so myself and the staff here, we considered the question and made a couple of recommendations. One would be in the branch chiefs agreement and the budget legislation is that a specific set aside be made for the mandated stipends. The second recommendation could be that when the budget comes up, which is where we are now, is that the BIM be amended to include language that would speak to the matter. So in one of our reviews, we mentioned that one of the problems we have is the term fixed costs. Now, in this particular amendment, the fixed cost definition even is being amended to include chapter official stipends. And that can be done. I'm not saying it can't be, but to us in OMB, if that's done, it opens the door for other cost categories to try to get in to the fixed cost grouping. And the reason there's an advantage there, of course, is the term fixed, meaning it's fully funded at the start. Now, last year, the Budget and Finance Committee included office space, and building rental as eligible costs or allowable costs in fixed costs. So the fixed cost budget schedule grew by about 4 or 5 such allocations. And the question we had at the time and still have is that, well, if we start to do that, there's other programs who could jump on board by saying, what about our office space rental? And it begins to grow and grow. Now, in my opinion and observation over the years, that's really not what the fixed costs were for. Fixed costs were for debts and obligations, such as loan agreements. And then those central costs that can be borne for the entire government, like telecommunications, utilities, and so forth. That originally was how the fixed cost group was done and handled. But now we start to open the door and add on all these other features. Well, in our opinion, we're sort of like deviating from the original notion of fixed costs. But again, as I said, that's at the discretion of B&F committee at this time, pursuant to this agreement. We felt that just setting aside the chapter official stipends at the mandatory amount in the planning allocations, as the branch chiefs agreement mentioned, that is now on page 4 of the B&F budget legislation, would be sufficient. Mr. Chair, committee members, that's the view from OMB. Again, in summary, the committee, of course, can add this language in the BIM. We're a little afraid that this action opens the door to other mandatory meetings of other entities. So again, as we go on, more and more could be added. And when that's done, the fixed cost group begins to grow, both in number and in amount. So when that's taken off the top, see, it leaves less funds for everything else. That's the concern question we have. Mr. Chair, committee members, that's the opinion or comments from OMB. Thank you.
Vice Chair Smith, with that explanation, and the other part too is for the committee is that the chapter stipends are part of the Navajo Nation codes, where it states that the chapter officials will be paid for planning meetings and regular meetings. And that's why I was following. And then at the same time, there was an amendment made to Title 26 to put the chapter official stipend at $500 per meeting. And so all this amendment is doing is just complementing what's already in the law. And so that we need to be mindful of that, Shananta, as Mr. Biel had stated that there'll be others following, but just keeping in mind that if it's part of the Navajo Nation code, then the way I look at it, makes it a whole lot easier to make these types of amendments to fund those activities. So Vice Chair Smith, and back to the Budget and Finance Committee.
Chair Henyo and Attorney Lowell and OMB, Mr. Bial, for the information on behalf of Amendment 1. Back to the committee members. With that, is there any further questions or concerns regarding Amendment 1? I'm not hearing any.
Vice Chair,
So
may I, Eugene So.
Feda Hatzi.
Eugene So.
We're dealing with the Amendment 1. No, Eugene So. Budget Committee members.
Just for the record. Thank you.
Goshe, for the record. And also for the record, we have Vice Chair Otto So on board with us. Nanda, we'll call for the question.
Delegate Yellowhairs, I have a question. Vice Chairman Chitu.
Goshe, I'll go ahead and recognize you. Chiche, you have the floor.
Okay, yeah, no, thank you very much. This budget policy is very important. Yes, we always have a very huge problem with the stopping pay. I only wish the Dr. Yellowman should be listening on this matter. Budget is important because of a 50-50 formula. It's an old formula that really caused problems. Stopping pay are all not counted in there. I think before the 50-50 formula is established, all personnel should be accounted under chapter levels. Next is also a stopping money should also be accounted. All that before that, put everything on top before formula is created. And also there's others. There's other pertains to personnel. Maybe Mr. Bial can help here. It's a percentage of the pertains to a benefit payment percentage insurance that a payout. I don't know which line of that was used. That goes along with personnel. Depends on overall a benefit include a thing before benefit add-on. I think we should have also add on to this legislation. Mr. Bial, you know what I'm talking about? Because this has to be done with it too. It has to be included with personnel. That way it won't, that we don't have, that way we'll have a complete budget for the chapters budgets. That's my my questions, Mr. Bial. Do you know what I'm talking about, Mr. Bial? Also, Dr. Yellowman should also be on the line listening, because this is their budget under chapters, Community Chapter Development Office. Mr. Bial, Vice Chairman should too. I don't thank you to bring this legislation, Chairman Henio.
What do you mean? Honorable Jimmy here. Go ahead and turn the floor over to sponsor, Chair Henio, Amendment 1.
Vice Chair Smith, regarding the extra expenses at the chapter level. And those are the expenses, but at the same time, like I stated earlier, the reason why I have been following this, requesting for this amendment, was the fact that it's part of the Navajo Nation Code of how chapter officials should be paid. And even I felt this would be easy, a good route to take, because it's the law, and it has already been amended by council. And so even I think as a committee, we should stick with the issue at hand, which is the chapter stipends, fixing that, and then we can address the other parts, which Delegate Jimmy Yellowhair, as insurance expenses and so forth. But with that, Mr. Bial, do you have any further response or?
Mr. Chair, looking for my copy of the Fringe benefit schedule. New revised one. Because I believe the Fringe benefit schedule for staffing, I know includes the chapter officials. Benefits. Mr. Chair, committee members, staff is informing me that it isn't a Fringe benefit schedule. The chapter official stipend or chapter officials use the temporary employee Fringe benefit rate. So it's included in budgeting. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Hey, Vice Chair Smith, back to you and the committee.
Well, thank you for that, Chair Henio and Dominic. Committee members, any further questions before we call for the question?
Okay, this is Delegate Yellowhair again, the two chair.
Coach, you have a question?
Okay. The best about you give it that we like to pay, make sure everything's all paid in full for the salaries and benefit. Everything should be paid plus the stipend. By us, need a benefit. Deep that personal They call insurance premium under up to code 7710. The personnel, but they call property contents of this under 7720. Plus 7740 vehicle auto liability 8 peso, but that it as personnel. Auto T 7750 vehicle auto physical stop at that auto payment policy for general liability 8 up at that auto deductible $500 of a car stop at that these are all in formula. Auto working compensation up at that could these there's about a LOD and up to cope that the personnel planet with fresh benefit rate at any planet DB says dog best of the so that should be also an add-on to a amendment keep it to here. Could so that we won't be shortfall. These are very important budget to be added on with the amendment by us Tigi Koro Satora Dr. Yellman that's the such a budget the budget these are shortfalls. There's always a problem with the chapter levels with these starting dito be to go to yat and so by us protect wash there's to not the kid not this kid. Dr. Youngman should comment on this one here. They have their accountant there in their office too. They should respond. They will not this kid should to Dr. Youngman that is when here shouldn't only go and go back on you and give the floor back to you. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Che, for that question. Back to Chair Henio.
Kashina, here, Lashna, Vice Chair Smith. Again, as I stated, chapter stipends are part of the code, Navajo Nation Code, and part of Title 26. So even that's why I looking at fixed costs for this particular line item. When it comes to fringe rates and insurance rates, they change every year. Every year they change depending on formulas. Like just now when we approved the fringe rate for FY 2023, that was a recommendation from the Retirement Plan Action Committee, Account Committee, and so that changed from last year. Same way with the insurance, because insurance risk management, they do their own study and decide, okay, this is what will be the new rate for this year. So this doesn't change, but this chapter of special stipend, since 2010, it's been never changed at all. And we're hoping to keep this for future budget instruction manuals and allocations. So if we can let's just stick to one item here, which is the chapter official stipends. And even we can move through this. And if there's any other amendments that need to be made, then work with Office of Legislative Counsel to put these amendments into. But let's try not to let's leave this by itself. Back to you, Vice Chair.
Well, thank you, Chair Henio. Committee members, at this point in time, I'll call for the question on Amendment 1.
Okay.
Could you please give the roll call vote?
Chair, Vice Chairman, roll call vote on amendment number 1. Honorable Jamie Henio, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you. Honorable Jamie Henio votes green. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair, how do you vote?
I vote green. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Ramona, I think you're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. I am muted. Sorry. Recall on the amendment vote. Honorable Jamie Henyo, how do you vote? Honorable Jamie Henyo, how do you vote? Honorable
Green.
Okay, thank you. Honorable Jamie Henyo votes green. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair, how do you vote?
I vote green. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair votes green. Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote? Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote?
Delegate Brown voted green by text.
Okay.
And also Elmer Begay voted green by text.
Okay, thank you, Peggy. Vice Chairman, we have 4 members voting in the affirmative, 0 opposing, and Vice Chairman not voting. Vice Chairman?
Thank you for that roll call vote, Shanella. This amendment 1 has passed with 4 in favor, no opposition, and Vice Chair not voting. Committee members of the Budget and Finance Committee, at this point in time, I'll turn the gavel over to Shiche. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair, Shawanda, could you take over? I'll be losing contact here for about maybe 25 to 30 minutes, and I'll get back on. Shiche, could you take over the gavel?
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Akoshi. Thank you for the opportunity.
Pro Tem, and this is Peggy.
Peggy, go ahead. I can still hear you guys.
Oh, okay. So I was just gonna coach Delegate Yellowhair. We do have a second amendment that's proposed too.
Vice Chair Smith, Delegate Henyo.
Chair Henry, go ahead.
Motion for amendment number 2. If Peggy can read this amendment into the record, which is from Ms. Office Legislative Counsel, Mr. Pahi.
Thank you. We have a motion for 2. Could we have that read into the record before I request for a second?
If you will look at your amendment to, and it says it's titled Amendment to 0102-22. That will become Amendment 2. And it states, make the following amendments to the Budget Instructions Manual Exhibit D. In Section 2 on page 5, add the following as a new paragraph. So this is new language. D, reports required by the Appropriations Act in compliance with Section 850A of the Appropriations Act. OMB and the Office of the Controller shall monitor all programs' budgeted expenses against their actual expenditures and shall provide quarterly reports on such expenditures to the Budget and Finance Committee and to the branch chiefs with regard to their respective branches. On a quarterly basis, all programs shall timely provide relevant information to OMB and the Office of the Controller to assist the 2 offices in the preparation of the required quarterly reports. Revise Section 12 on pages 25 through 27 as follows. 12, requesting is underscored, supplemental appropriations is underscored, overstricken is funding request procedures. A, purpose is overstricken. Considerations is a new word. Due to the limited availability of funds, overstricken. The Navajo Nation leadership should carefully, overstricken is weigh the new language, consider all applicable, and then existing word is laws. New language, regulations, policies is new words. Existing is priorities and any extenuating circumstances before. Consideration of is overstricken. New language, approving supplemental funding request is overstricken. New language, supplemental appropriations. Further, the Navajo, existing language, further, the Navajo Nation must consider. Its is a new word. Obligations is existing. Overstricken in terms of mandates ordered by the courts. New language regarding court-ordered funding. Existing language, required matching funds to capture external funds, the health and safety of the general public, emergency situations, unmet needs, and other. Overstricken is extenuating. Existing language is circumstances, and there's a new is a period after. Overstricken language which might arise during the course of the fiscal year. New language, B, Appropriation Act requirements. And existing language, all supplemental. Overstricken as funding. New language, appropriation. Existing is request shall. Overstricken be submitted through the Navajo Nation official administrative review process before consideration. New language is adhere to the applicable provisions of the Appropriations Act, period. And then the remainder of that sentence is overstricken. The overstricken language is by the appropriate oversight committee, budget and finance committee, then the Bikia committee and Navajo Nation Council. Then other sentence is overstricken. OMB will review all written analysis and recommendations and prepare a budget impact analysis pursuant to 12 NC section 820M. Okay, so B is overstricken, a new C, procedures, period. And requirements is overstricken. Existing language, the following, and then overstricken requirements. Procedures is a new word, apply to new word is all, supplemental. And then funding is overstricken. Appropriation is underscored, requests. 1, new language required, OMB forms. The words Navajo Nation programs and entities is overstricken. New language, those. Seeking A is new language supplemental. Overstricken is funding, and then appropriation is new language shall, and then use the supplemental funding request form in is overstricken. Underscored is complete appendix K, and there's a semicolon. And is a new word, budget forms 1, 2, and 4. Semicolon is added, and if applicable, budget forms is underscored 3. 5 and 6, and there's a semicolon. Existing language, overstricken is and. If funds for a capital is existing language, new language improvement project is overstricken, a new word are requested. Budget forms 1 and 2 and the project process schedule form in appendix. That's overstricken. Appendix is remaining J, and then underscored shall be completed. Entities external to the Navajo Nation government is overstricken. External entities underscored shall also complete. The grant application form shown in is overstricken. Appendix G. Any incomplete or inaccurate supplemental funding request is overstricken. Budget forms is a new word, will be returned for corrections. And then overstricken is if corrections are not made and not submitted within 5 working days, the request will not be recommended for funding. That's overstricken. New language, requesting parties should seek the assistance of OMB in selecting and completing the appropriate budget forms. 2 is new signatures. This is all new language. A, budget forms have signature lines for appropriate programs. Excuse me, let me start over. A, budget forms have signature lines for appropriate program persons, including division directors and or branch chiefs. Completed budget forms showing the signatures of those noted on the form shall be provided to the sponsoring delegate before proposed legislation for a supplemental appropriation request enters the legislative process. B, under the legislative process, budget forms may be revised or replaced by any reviewing committee or the council via an amendment to the supplemental appropriation legislation. In such cases, new signatures on the budget form shall not be required. This is new language. 3, controller and OMB review. As required by 12 NNC section 820L, all requests shall be reviewed by the controller for determination whether the requesting party's proposed expenditures are recurring or non-recurring. As required by 12 NNC section 820M, all requests shall be reviewed by OMB, and OMB shall provide a statement regarding the financial consequences to the Navajo Nation's overall budget that will result if a request is approved. Budget impact analysis in parentheses. The controllers and OMB's review statement shall be provided to the sponsoring delegate before proposed legislation for a supplemental appropriation request enters the legislative process. 4 is new in its entirety. It's underscored. Other requirements for supplemental appropriation requests. A, budgets for the request must be prorated so that funding covers only the remaining portion of the current fiscal year, i.e. funds appropriated in January must be budgeted for spending from February to the end of the fiscal year, in parentheses, 8 months. Or funds appropriated in April must be budgeted for spending from May to the end of the fiscal year, in parentheses, 5 months. B, if a request is not approved and the requesting party still wishes to pursue the funding, the request must be updated and resubmitted every 4 months to reflect any changes during the 4-month period. C, if the request is not approved in the previous fiscal year and the requesting party still wishes to pursue the funding, the proposal must be revised and resubmitted for the current fiscal year. 5 is new language recommendations. OMB recommends the, and then a small f. But then it's following with a colon. Overstricken language are additional requirements for submission of supplemental budgets. A is signatures, and that's overstricken. This language is overstricken. Budget forms are encouraged to have the signature of the appropriate division department with written concurrence from the appropriate branch chief or division director as appropriate. B is overstricken. A new A, justification with a period. Small I, and then and, the word and is overstricken. New language, the requesting party should, but is not required to provide and then existing language explanation of the reasons. Funding is overstricken, and then a supplemental appropriation is underscored, is being requested outside the regular or is overstricken. Annual fiscal year budget development process. A new B, double I, identification of is overstricken. Other funds is underscored. The requesting party should, but is not required to provide a list of, is underscored, any other sources of funding considered and pursued if the supplemental funding request is not funded is existing language. C is overstricken and D is overstricken in its entirety. So is 2. And they read C, supplemental funding request, if not initially funded, must be updated and resubmitted every 4 months to reflect any changes during the 4-month period. D, if the proposal is not funded in the previous fiscal year, the proposal must be revised and resubmitted for the current fiscal year. 2, the budget for supplemental funding requests must be prorated to fund only the remaining portion of the fiscal year, i.e. funds appropriated in January must be budgeted for spending from February to the end of the fiscal year. 8 months of funds appropriated in April must be budgeted for spending from May to the end of the fiscal year, 5 months. C is overstricken. D is a new D. Overstricken supplemental funding request for capital is existing language. Improvement is underscored projects, period. 1, CPMD review is new language. All supplemental appropriation underscored requests overstricken for supplemental funding for related to any is underscored capital. Improvement is underscored projects. Project S is overstricken and shall be submitted to the Capital Projects Management Department, CPMD, within the Division of Community Development in accordance with the Appropriations Act 12 NNC Section 800 at SEEK is added. And with is underscored. Written policies and procedures for capital improvement projects and capital budget development. CPMD may be reached at 928-871-6211 is underscored. 2, capital improvement plan is underscored. Overstricken language. The appropriation of funding, including supplemental funding for capital improvement projects, is subject to the approval of the Navajo Nation Council upon the recommendation of the Budget and Finance Committee, and if any supplemental appropriation would result in a is underscored. Modification or amendment affecting an approved capital improvement plan. The appropriation request must be approved, underscored, is underscored. Overstricken is subject to concurrence by the appropriate oversight committee prior to consideration of the Navajo Nation Council 12 NNC Section 860C2. Overstricken in its entirety is 3 for further instructions on the development of supplemental funding requests for capital improvement projects. Contact CPMD at 928-871-6211. And then D is overstricken in its entirety. It's a D, branch chiefs review and recommendations consistent with the requirements for the budget forms and the supplemental funding proposal summary. The appropriate branch chiefs are encouraged to and provide recommendations on supplemental funding requests before they are submitted to the Oversight Committee and the Budget and Finance Committee for review and action. Whenever possible, the branch review shall include a prioritized list of the supplemental funding requests for consideration given to the overall Navajo Nation fund balance and other supplemental funding requests that are in process. And that's all overstricken language. E, legislative, and then committee is overstricken. Process is underscored. Overstricken language, a Navajo Nation Council delegate shall introduce legislation to sponsor the appropriate branch chiefs. New language, legislation is required for all, and then existing is supplemental. Overstricken is funding. New language, appropriation request has a new S, and then recommendation is overstricken. And then new language, the appropriation request shall be reviewed by the, and then appropriate oversight committee is existing. New language, the Budget and Finance Committee and the Navajo Committee and the Navajo Nation Council gives final approval. And then may approve or deny the request for supplemental funding. However, the legislation shall move on for further legislative action is overstricken. Overstricken is timetable. OMB and or the Budget and Finance Committee may issue timelines and any further instructions or guidelines as appropriate for the development and processing of the supplemental funding request. Overstricken is G, Budget and Finance Committee action. Budget and Finance Committee may develop and sponsor legislation recommending a consolidated supplemental funding request to the Navajo Nation Council pursuant to 2 NC Section 300C and 12 NC Section 820. H is overstricken in its entirety. Navajo Nation Council pursuant to 12 NC Section 820L. The Navajo Nation Council may approve supplemental appropriations during the fiscal year. 1, if and when additional sources of revenues above and beyond the initial or current revenue projections are projected and which are also in excess of the reserve amount set in Section 820J, or 2, when the unreserved undesignated fund balance is in excess of the reserve amount set forth at Section 820J. Final action on supplemental funding legislation will be taken by the Navajo Nation Council during one of its sessions on the supplemental funding requests which meet the requirements of these procedures. And then it says revise certain definitions in Section 14 as follows. 14 definitions, add a new definition between 10 and 11 on page 29. New language. 11, external entities, private organizations, businesses, corporations, or individuals that are not part of the Navajo Nation government or any of its chapters and are not established or chartered by the Navajo Nation government or any of its chapters. Then renumber the defined terms in Section 14 accordingly. Amend the following definitions on page 29. 14, lapse funds. Language is overstricken funds designated as general funds and not expended as outlined in the annual Navajo Nation comprehensive budget for personnel costs are considered lapsed, expired in parentheses, and are no longer available for use by programs pursuant to CF 0711. Underscored language. Lapse funds means appropriated funds that are not encumbered or spent by the applicable statutory or contractual deadline for the expenditure of the funds and thus revert to the original source of the funds. In parentheses, usually the general fund in parentheses. On page 30, 24 Navajo Nation entities, organizations, which is overstricken, that is underscored, are overstricken, independent and or separate from, new language, not a part of, existing the Navajo Nation government, comma is added, but, and then overstricken language exists for the benefit of, new language are affiliated with the Navajo Nation. On page 30, 32, supplemental appropriation, and is underscored, capital A is overstricken, small a is added, appropriation, and then underscored of funds from the UUFB, overstricken made to a Navajo Nation program or entity after approval of the comprehensive budget existing during the fiscal year, comma, new language outside of the annual comprehensive budget process, then existing language 12 NC section 820L. Move the following definitions on page 29. 14 lapse funds and 15 local government improvement projects should be placed after 20 in-kind match allowances on page 30 so that the list of defined terms is alphabetically correct. And that ends the reading of Amendment 2, Vice Chair, or Jimmy Yellowhair. Delegate Yellowhair, you are muted.
Okay, yeah, now, Sister read the amendment number 2 into the records. I'd like to request for a motion to accept this amendment number 2, should not be in the committee. And any questions, thoughts to the chairman? Diga here.
Oh, I made a motion to that, Pro Tem Chair.
Okay. Actually, ready for a vote for this amendment number 2 should not only be in a committee.
Pro Tem, we need a second to the motion, please.
I'm sorry.
That'll give me a second.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Piquet. Let's vote for amendment number 2. Call for the vote.
Yes, Pro Tem Chair, roll call vote on amendment number 2. Honorable Jamie Hingle, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you, Honorable Jamie Hingle votes green. Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote? Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote? Honorable Elmer P. Begay, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you, Honorable Elmer P. Begay votes green. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote? Honorable Raymond
Green.
Smith Jr., thank you. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr. votes green. Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote?
Delegate Brown votes green.
Thank you, Honorable Nathaniel Brown votes green. Pro Tem Chair, we have 4 members voting in the affirmative, 0 opposing. Pro Tem Chair not voting. Pro Tem Chair? Honorable Jimmy Yellow here.
Okay, now, this amendment has been passed now, and I'd like to give the floor back to Mr. Henio. Still a sponsor.
Okay, Pro Tem Chair, even the amendment is but I don't have anything to add. We're back to the main motion. So I'll leave it up to you if you wish to call for the question or and ask for more questions.
I guess we're done with this. Ready for the call for the vote, please.
Yes, Pro Tem Chair, roll call vote on the main motion. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote? Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote?
Green.
Thank you. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr. votes green. Honorable Jamie Henio, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you. Honorable Jamie Henio votes green. Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote? Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote?
Delegate Brown votes green.
Thank you. Honorable Nathaniel Brown votes green. Honorable Elmer P. Begay, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you. Honorable Elmer P. Begay votes green. Pro Tem Chair, we have 4 members voting in the affirmative, 0 opposing. Pro Tem not voting. Pro Tem Chair?
Thank you. Thank you very much for roll call vote. Yeah, I guess this is a complete our legislation here, unless there's any questions. Back to you and Mr. Co-sponsor, Chairman.
Delegate Jimmy Yellow here for taking care of this legislation and chairing the meeting. Vice Chair Smith, getting back on the agenda.
We do have no other new business items. So after this, we'll go to reports. 5A, we do have one report from Peggy. Who's this report from?
Chair Henio, we still have a business item. That's to reschedule July 19th.
Okay, I'm sorry. Oh, let's move to the new business item. Rescheduling July 19th. It's because of the summer session. And so we need to move that. Take out your calendars and then let's look at what's available, Peggy. You would recommend the Tuesday before or the Tuesday after?
That's up to the committee chair. As far as I know, well, in July, there's July 12th and there's July 26th. Those dates, but you can have it any other day if you want. It doesn't necessarily have to be on a Tuesday, Chair.
Chair Andrews, Vice Chair Smith.
Vice Chair Smith, you have the floor.
Yes, since we're getting close to Navajo Nation summer session, there's usually requests for P&F to be busy on new business with legislations being requested from our 24th Navajo Nation Council. So I recommend July 12th to be moved from the 19th so that we could entertain before the summer session. Thank you.
Vice Chair Smith, is that your motion for July 12th?
No, motion to stay.
Motion by Vice Chair Smith. They rescheduled the July 19th meeting to July 12th. With that, is there a second? Was there a second?
Yellow hair second.
Delegate Jimmy Yellow Hair. Second. So we do have a motion and a second on the floor for July 19th to July 12th to begin at 10 o'clock. Vice Chair Smith, 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock.
Okay, so with that, any questions, comments on this particular action item? Then I'll call for the question. Ramona, if you would lead us to roll call vote for July 12th, 2022 at 10 o'clock a.m. for the next rescheduled BNF committee meeting.
Chairman Henyo, roll call vote on rescheduling the meeting. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote?
Green.
Thank you. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr. votes green. Honorable Jimmy Yellow Hair, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you. Honorable Jimmy Yellow Hair votes green. Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote?
Delegate Brown votes green.
Thank you. Honorable Nathaniel Brown votes green. Honorable Elmer P. Begay, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you. Honorable, Elmer P. Begay votes green. Chairman, we have 4 members voting in the affirmative, 0 opposing. Chairman not voting. Chairman?
Four in favor, 0 opposed, chair not voting. We have rescheduled our July regular meeting to July 12th, 2022 to begin at 10 o'clock. So getting back to the agenda.
Chair Henio, for some reason, somebody muted you.
Okay, I'm back on. She was talking away. I was on giveaway. I gave away $100 to somebody, but they didn't hear me, so that's good. So anyway,
I
Mr.
heard you.
Templetero, are you available? Director Tom Platero.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Kashina, thank you, Mr. Platero. You have the floor to give a report to the Budget and Finance Committee.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm just going to provide, I did a report to you last on June 7th. So the items I'm going to report on are things that have happened since that time. The FRF office found office space in Sabanito. We are finishing up the lease for it, and that will be where we'll be located. We did try to see if we could get a building using the admin cost, but we were informed by DOJ that that wasn't possible for administrative support costs. So we did find office space. We have about 2/3 of our staff in office space, and so we're just looking for the administration. And so that's completed. We did update the ARPA NNFRF budget summary reports on the NNFRF website, so that information is available. We are getting staff on, so we should be able to keep up with the schedule of the 1st and the 15th to update that information. Also, the FRF staff have reached out to all of the programs that have contracts. So the subrecipient contracts are posted, and the consultant contracts are all posted on the FRF website. We have been partnering up with the Division of Human Resources and the Department of Personnel Management, and they're going to be doing a new system for online application process, and that has gone through the bidding process. They've selected a vendor, and one of our staff is finishing up on that contract. That project was also reviewed again by Department of Justice and determined eligible for administrative regulatory support costs. I believe the contract is going to be $4 to $5 million, but it will update the process that we currently use, and the intention is to make it a contactless process. We did also work with our engineering section. Now that we have a relatively good idea of what projects will be done, our engineering or our technical regulatory support section will be releasing an RFQ for an IDIQ, indefinite delivery, indefinitely quantity, for engineering services. And what we want to do is use that same contract for all of the other administrative regulatory support programs that may need engineering services. So we'll complete our section of it, and then if other programs want to use those vendors, they'll be able to shortcut the whole process and just use the IDIQ contract that will be developed underneath the NNFRF office. Our team has been assisting the broadband office. Ms. Sonia Nez is the director over there. She should be getting 3 additional staff. And so we've been facilitating her meetings and providing her as much support as we can. Hopefully their office will be set up pretty soon. On the hiring for the nearly 200 positions, we do have a team now at the FR office. Ms. Shirlene Johnson, Heather Springer, Kayla Wilson, and Lori Caldwell will all be working with the programs to bring on staff for all of those positions, because we do need to get everybody hired. So they'll be doing recruitment efforts, trying to recruit individuals into those. There are several programs that still haven't completed their PCQ, so those positions aren't classified, so they'll be working with all of those programs. The Washington, D.C. office did reach out to us, and we'll be helping facilitate their process. They have a new director, and so we forward them all the information on their budget for administrative support costs. We did start working with the Department of Public Safety Management Information System We took one of the positions that was at the NNFRF office and placed them over there to streamline the process of background, generating the reports for the background review process. Hopefully that will expedite the process here. They did make a selection, Mr. Orlando Bowman over there, and he'll be working on getting his staff through the OBI review process so that they can get on board. We did attend a meeting with the Alliance for Navajo Broadband last week, I believe on Wednesday or Thursday in Farmington. And what we relayed to the Alliance is that we really, there's certain language within the ARPA legislation that provided this funding as far as it relates to broadband. And we wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page with that. The first of that is that the service, that the broadband services, that the reliability meets or exceeds symmetrically upload and download speeds of 10 megabytes per second. Most of the services that are on the Navajo Nation are less than that. And we wanted to make sure that we all are in agreement that that 100 megabytes per second is maintained. The idea behind that is any development in broadband, we don't want to be spending money trying to upgrade the process. It'll be best to try to get it done now as opposed to trying to pass that upgrade cost to customers in the future. So we are hopeful that everybody that's within our group that's working with the broadband project will make that a priority to make sure that we do that, and also to coordinate services so that if there's any fiber lines that are going to be laid, that we add in additional conduit lines so that those can be used later on. So we are trying to coordinate across the different groups that are working on that project. And the next part of it is to integrate affordability options into the program development. Again, we want to make sure that when the broadband system is put together, that people can actually afford to use it after it's all developed. The third is to support for local networks owned, operated by those affiliated with local governments, nonprofits, and cooperatives. And this goes in line with the membership of the Alliance, the community, the 2 colleges, the higher learning institutions on the Navajo Nation, educational institutions, hospitals, all of that. We want to make sure that they're included in that process. The fourth point that we need to get across is to avoid investing in locations with existing agreements to build reliable wireless speeds of 100 megabytes per second download and 20 megabytes per second upload by December 31, 2024. In order to avoid duplication of efforts and resources. So we did let them know that we want to make sure that we are all on the same page, that we're going towards the same goal. So they were in agreement with it, and the service providers that were part of that group were also in agreement. We do need to go back and meet with the internal groups within the Navajo Nation as far as and also update the higher learning institutions on the Navajo Nation. We also participated in the New Mexico Legislative Finance Committee meeting in Gallup last Friday, where we provided information on some of the goals and objectives of the NNFRF offices, some of the things we're planning as far as reporting, tracking projects. So they did make a request to include the state districts so that they're able to glean the information for the projects that are within their legislative districts. Mr. Chair, that's pretty much all that we have at this moment. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Platero, for your report. Shenandoah Budget and Finance Committee, is there a motion to accept the report?
Delegate Yellen, motion.
Chair Henio, this is Delegate Crotty. I'm back on the call and I'll second. Thank you.
So we do have a motion and a second. So with that, the floor is open for questions. Are there any questions for Mr. Platero?
Chair Henio, this is Delegate Crotty with a question.
Chair Henry, this delegate here has a question too.
Question on Delegate Andrew Canes-Laflatte, you have to say?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee members. Mr. Petero, thank you for your report. I think the concern is in terms of the different programs you identified that have not finalized their PCQ. If you could provide the committee that summary. We're looking at that this legislation was passed last July, so it's nearly been a year. And a concern, an administrative concern should be how do you get PCQs not only developed, but advertised? And understanding that these budgets are multi-year budgets, I still think there's an opportunity for the council to reimagine how much funding should go to administrative costs. If the programs are not moving forward to do the proper documentation to hire, then there should be alternative methods. I've always talked in Champion, I think it should be at a regional level rather than Window Rock, and especially now knowing how time consuming it is to create a PCQ and how many positions are still vacant in the different departments who have requested ARPA funding for administrative costs. So my second question would be, if these are multi-year budgets, the last breakdown that I saw was, I think, only 3% of the budgets were expended. What average are we on right now? And the legislation 0086-22 is recommending $40 million to be transferred from the administrative budget into other projects or possible hardship shortfall. But it looks like there should be additional funding available to redistribute out for direct services if administratively the offices cannot come together, get their PCQs, get things organized, and be able to hire. I'll echo my same concern. Every member of your office is from a different division or department, and we've already seen how that has impacted the flow of things getting done internally on Navajo Nation. And then I want to make a comment. When do you think your office will be providing that information to the state legislatures? I know as delegates we had to wait, nearly 6 months to get somewhat of a breakdown in terms of how these projects will impact our communities. Thank you, Chair, and I'll yield back the floor.
Shay, yeah, last Natal for your question. Last Natal, Delegate Elmer PBG.
Can you hear me?
Elmer PBG. Oh, I can hear you now.
Okay, Chair Henry, I have a question on the Mr. Petero regarding the broadband, the office that is established, and then also the personnel that are hired to work at that office. I've been, I think all the delegates, and then the telecommunication regulatory, and then the commissioners, and then the cyber team knows about Dalcon District 7 broadband. That is, they have a design build plan, which is applied it to National Telecommunication Administration Office in Washington. So our application for that grant is out there, and we applied it for Arizona grants for broadband too, with the Arizona Commerce Authority too. So the first one, we finally got a support from the Nabakia, which we're very thankful, and we're at the final and the third and final phase there. So they're doing evaluation there for that grant. So with that, how is your office or that office that's there broadband? How they can support us? How they can help us what kind of assistance can they provide? I know that they cannot design. I know that they cannot be a provider. But after this grant is being construction started, what kind of assistance can they provide? Can they, or if can maybe give us a written maybe outline of the scope of their work, what they can be doing, what kind of work, or they can be helping the chapters as far as broadband. Maybe you could put it in writing. I know that you said there's going to be no duplication of project of work. Didn't need so. So those things, those kind of outline on the scope of work, I think we need to see it. We need to see we have some people that are consultant to us that knows a lot about the broadband and fiber optics too. So there's two. We can choose wireless, and then we can see fiber optic, and then which one are they be really working on it? What's their expertise? That we might question. One. The second one is are they going to be applying for grants? There's a lot of broadband grants that are available out there. According to either from the Navajo Nation. Untitled Chapter, they do what they can to do that. There's a lot over there, but it's really hard, intensive of this application. How you got to know a lot about the designing, and then how will it work. And need to all these the uploads and downloads and 25 ups, 25 down and 3 ups, and then you get around 100 megabytes. You had to know what you're talking about. It's all in there. How they can design, what kind of device are they going to be used? Are they ready for those kind of grant that they can be applying for it? Then the third one is we have no funds that you set aside with this ARPA fund is for any type of matching funds for grants. Like for example, how can we are they can be able to help us that office to make a ready project? What kind of work can we put in there to use that, utilizing the ARPA funds to get to a project so that project can be eligible for all these grants that are out there? Are they going to be working on it? I mean, those kind of work, I think we need to look at it. I'll hire that either or how can they help us this broadband? Because District 7 here, I have my all chapters which we've been applying grants on our own. So nobody says anything, nobody supports us from the Navajo Nation. So maybe you can explain that to me or give us a rundown of the scope of work again. So thank you, Chair. That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Back to you, Mr. Platero. The response. Tom Platero, you there?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. I was jumping around trying to get myself on mute. My apologies. We're doing budget hearings for general services and this at the same time, so I apologize. In regards to Delegate Crotty's questions, the different programs that have PCQs, that has actually already been resolved. For the FRF programs that have received administrative and regulatory support, there's a modified form of the 5-page one that DPM authorized. And so classifying those positions is merely just transposing that information on. then DPM uses that PCQ, the modified PCQ, to create the JVAs. So the programs actually don't have to do any work. They just have to do that PCQ. I think a lot of people are just stretched amongst so many different projects that trying to get people to just work on this has been a bit of a challenge. So the preliminary work has been done. DPM has been very supportive in this process, and so we just have to get people moving to get those positions that are there. We do have some programs that have referrals, and so we're going to be following up with them on why they're not moving on those ones. But it's very similar between ARPA and other funded positions. I'll give you an example. When I came to General Services, there was a referral that was a year old. There was a referral that was 9 months old. It's really management's responsibility to respond to referrals when they're done. So that's why we got our team together to begin working with them to say, what's the issue? How can we help so that we can get these positions hired for? The other part is a lot of the I shouldn't say a lot, some of the programs that did receive funding underneath here are now realizing that the people that they're going to add on are going to need space. So office space is becoming an issue so that these individuals can be hired out there. Certain programs are looking out in the field. Not all of these positions are going to be in Window Rock. Some of the positions are going to be out there. And so they're working to make sure that those agreements are in place for the new work sites. The multi-year budget that you're talking about has already been handled. Our FRF office coordinated with OMB and set those ones up so that all of the budgets are set up for the entirety of the ARPA funding. So that's already been taken care of. All of the administrative support budgets have been using that template, and so that's taken care of. As far as the review, if you'll recall, underneath CJY 4121, Council is going to review all of the allocated budgets at the end of the second quarter in 2024. So there is still some time between now and then because the project designations and funding to those projects have to be all in place by December 30th, 2024. So those all have to be completed and ready to go. As far as 8622, I've sat in on the meetings with the president's team, and president made that decision to say that doesn't look like we're going to use all of the ARPA funding. So we want to make sure that we fund more direct projects. And so that was where president directed his team to take that 40-something million and put it back into direct fund projects. And he also did instruct us to track all of the costs for the administrative support ones. I don't have the budget in front of me, but you do have that information. Also, Mr. Chair, members of the Budget and Finance Committee, I did email you the summary report of all of the positions. The 24th Navajo Nation Council was provided that. I try to be as transparent as possible with the information that I have access to. And I believe I did email that to the 24th Navajo Nation Council. As far as the how are we going to work with the state legislatures? I didn't mean that we were going to put them first. We are still working on developing a GIS section. We recruited an individual from the Division of Community Development, and she's getting her equipment lined up, the software lined up. It's just taking the information of approved projects. There's a difference between projects that are being proposed to approved projects. So the young lady's working on putting that together so it's available so that it can be done. We are going to be looking at the reports that were submitted by NTUA. We'll also be posting all of those reports again in an effort to be as transparent as possible because that was one of our marching orders. Although Shana Elmer Brigade, the broadband personnel, the Ninigiya, there's going to be a program department manager. There's an admin assistant, and then there's a principal planner and a programs and project specialist. to bitna anishto lesha no benda huit tigo that the lista hot ni lay state jo doesn't go ya to I see na dal lista. A lot of the state projects are coordinated through one individual. Arizona, I believe, has 2 individuals coordinating for all of the whole state of Arizona. So Navajo Nation will have 4. As far as what was applied for, I don't have that information right now, but I understand there's some back and forth between NC, the funding source, and the Navajo Nation. And Mr. Tico Charlie is the lead for that at this moment. We haven't transitioned everything over yet. Our scope of work on how to work with chapters, Ms. Nesbitt, the intent is that we really need to coordinate services across all of the 110 chapters, across all of the counties in Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, the states themselves from Arizona, New Mexico, Utah. I know Delegate Key Allen Begay has a lot of information from the state of Arizona. And so it's taking all of that information because we need to be careful that we don't duplicate things. And that's taking some time to get all of that information. People are beginning to really work with this office and are very forthcoming and providing information to us. And what we're trying to do is get that GIS data so that we can begin to say this piece goes here, this piece goes there. It's kind of like putting a 1,000 piece puzzle together. You know, you don't begin to see the picture until you actually get a certain percentage of it done. And so that's where we're still working with other broadband stakeholders to get that whole visual of it. So I will, Delegate Begay, I will get with Ms. Sonia Nez, and I'll make sure that we set up a meeting with you to make sure that we address your concerns. As far as applying for grants, we already have a consultant on board that we are working to get the contract in place, but they've agreed to work with us to help prepare the grant applications for the Navajo Nation as a whole, not specifically one area or this community or that region or that agency, but to really look at it from a comprehensive view, because we do need, the need is all across the Navajo Nation. And so we have to take that approach of it and try to come up with a process to make sure that we get everybody resolved. Although matching the Ninigi Shana the 8622 $20 million I thought behitzo Kishin the Navajo Nation igi grant budget that anigi matching money I thought behitzo. So once council and president take action on that, we're hopeful that the broadband section of 120 million will remain intact. That is, again, your decision, the president's decision. All we do is after the approvals are made, then go to try and do the best we can to work with all of the stakeholders within the Navajo Nation. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Platero, for a response to the questions. Back to the committee. Any further questions, comments?
Delegate Begay, have a follow-up question.
Delegate Amr P. Begay, you have the floor.
Yeah, none of the Chair Henry, although the Platero, it's easy to say since the Navajo Nation is a government, you know, that people will be all served across the board to exactly home. But you know that there's some communities that are really active in it. I would say that because Telecommun chapter, they have a design built plan. They have some designer, and then also has a lot of experience of a broadband in how design that. So we have that plan, which is assessment, feasibility studies, up to tower and where these towers can go or they're on that. So if there's kind of a community that are ready, those kind of they're just ready for construction funding. Cause I get across the board not had another part of this. Here comes that for District 7 is 5 chapters that we have. Teachers and nobody wasn't. It's really hard to to do an assessment. Once you go behind these buttes, there's no signal. Because it's a but these buttes are a lot different. So even now, is how we got our grant. So even now, so it's I know that it's not for one community, but we have a proposal that is ready, that's out there, which is approved by the BIA. That proposal that and he go we're at that level too that the spectrum we apply for that too. We need a lot of assistance. We need a lot of technical assistance, and the only assistance that we're getting is from the outside people. So how are they going to be? This office will be helping with guidance and advices and even proposal writing or anything that that we need. That although understand that there's going to be a consultant or somebody that we was consulted. Can you share that with us or see where we need to look at where they at and how it actually so we need that information too to able to work in Indian country that handle. That's what we need to have input from the chapters. Thank you.
Delegate Unrepeated Begay for your question. Back to the Budget Finance Committee. Any further questions, comments from Mr. Platero? Back to Mr. Platero for your response to Delegate Unrepeated
Shana Delegate Begay actually need that but it does take time to get everything situated. We're very fortunate to have Ms. Nez and Mr. Charlie working jointly on this, and then we'll get our consultants. Contract we'll post those ones, but in the meantime, while it's going through the process, I'll make sure that my staff provide Budget and Finance a copy of the proposed contract as it's going through the 164 review process. It is all public information, so we have no problem in sharing that information. Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. Back to the Budget and Finance Committee. Any further questions?
Can you? This is Delegate.
Delegate Member Kneswakari, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. I think in terms of getting that information, Mr. Patero, are we following the Navajo Nation law by hiring Navajo? I think it's important, and in our agency meeting, Northern Agency meeting this weekend, I believe you were on the call when chapter officials are raising concerns that the Navajo Nation administration says, buy local, buy Navajo, but we're not finding any examples where these ARPA dollars that are being used to help hire Navajo contractors. I'm not sure in terms of if the engineer contract will just stay with Dibble. To my understanding, they're non-Navajo owned, and I'm not sure if they have any Navajo employees that are onboarded. Their last Navajo employee might have just been Paul Sinchaco. And so how are we creating an environment for our small business owners who time after time are struggling and saying, why can't this mother government support them in the work that they're trying to do, and at the very least require these contractors to maybe not subcontract, but at least work and build up the capacity of some of these small business owners who can do this work on the ground. We have normalized as a nation that it takes a year, and somehow that's normal to get a PCQ, or we have normalized how long it takes for a payment. We need to we need to deconstruct that process and say there's a better way. And your office has the ability right now to be a little bit innovative, even if it's 10%. But what we're keep seeing time and time again and hearing these reports is there's really no effective system that's being built up. I understand your analogy is a 1,000-piece puzzle. We'll get some expert puzzle makers in there, like the little grandmas at the senior center. They could bust out a 1,000-piece puzzle in 3 days. And so get someone in there who has the ability to do it. And you're sitting on multi-million-dollar funding contracts, and our people are waiting for these projects to be deployed. They're waiting for the right-of-way agent. They're waiting for that agent. They're waiting for that fish and wildlife person to be hired. I understand that's not your position to hire them, but it's your authority from the legislation is to make sure that these are effective processes and then provide recommendations. Because at this committee, and I think next meeting, we should be talking about if Navajo Nation can't spend that money, what can we do as a council to start redirecting and getting that money out? And again, at the regional, at the local level, if we could get those types of services, then at least we're providing some type of direct funding. And I don't think any longer this committee or this council should say everyone's stretched thin. Everyone's stretched thin because we're just taking from one another to work in a department and then leaving that other department understaffed and not have the resources that they need, when we could be pulling in multiple different agencies, and we don't even know who can provide those services because we're limiting it just to a small or semi-large contracting firm who has a long history with Navajo Nation. But who is benefiting from that? Who is benefiting at the end of the day? And I would like to know too, from our legislative council, if they're on the line, the money that went to the Division of Community Development, that is always changing. The division director is always verbally changing how that's administered. And our regions, our chapters, they need project managers now. And that money has just been sitting there. So if legislative council is on the line, what can I do as a delegate, or how can this committee support getting that money? And we have certified chapters who can hire individuals, they can work together, can coordinate. Instead, it's just it's just sitting here in Window Rock, and it's a shame. Thank you, Chair.
Shananta, over your question, I believe I heard Vice Chair Smith in the background too. If not, defer back to Mr. Patero. Response?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I've explained DIBBLE multiple times, so I'm not going to address that. But going forward, as far as I know, all of the contractors that we are working with now are Navajo. The other part of it is we have Navajos that we're trying to contract with, but we're trying to get them certified through the Business Regulatory Department, because once they get onto the 1 or 2, they are given priority for these projects. So we are making progress towards it. It may not seem like it, but what I'll do is our crew that does the reports, what we'll do is we'll modify it and then provide you an updated listing and let you know exactly which one of those are Navajo owned and operated. But we are making efforts. I'll give you an example. We're trying to do a contract, public outreach, and that individual that we're trying to hire is Navajo. Yes, they run a Navajo business, yes, but they're not registered with Business Regulatory. We're trying to get them registered there. So there are some vendors that are Navajo that really need to get on that priority listing. And we're trying to work with them and coordinate with them so that they become eligible, not just for this, but later on when they do other projects. So there are efforts ongoing. Mr. Chair.
Mr. Platero, for your response. With this, back to the Budget and Finance Committee. Any further questions, comments?
This is Delegate Begay.
Delegate Elmer P. Begay, you have the floor.
Thank you for that again. I don't care that to the Mr. Patero. I don't know today. You don't Ms. Cardi. I think we're very concerned out in the chapter area. I know that the Alcon chapter has been getting assistance from outside consultants, and it's the only way that we have a grant application that's at the national level, because there was no help from the Navajo Nation. So right now, but we're thankful that there's some funds that the Navajo Nation Council appropriated last year to hire these consultants. So right now, these are certified chapters, which my sister just Delegate Carter just mentioned about. That there's some certified chapters that are able to hire consultants, and with some a lot of expenditures that are spent on either or sufficiently financially they have a good record of it. So I don't know why we don't work with those chapters that are very active, that knows what they're doing right now. They're already hiring some of these consultants for broadband, because broadband is very new to us. And the only Navajo Nation we depend on is NTAW. And NTAW doesn't do any designing, but they have a consultant. There's all some companies that we don't know. That 49% of that ownership is owned by somebody else. I don't know, they make about millions of dollars out of us, and we don't even know. So we're at that point where, like, even, for example, we can get a quotation, how much it's going to cost to give us a quote for co-location. And then NTAW said that it costs over $2,000 to give you an application. That's an application. That's ridiculous. I never heard any business owner on the reservation that has that kind of authority, like to give you an application that costs money before it can be approved or not. But once it's approved, it costs over $3,000 to rent, and that's because it's a lot of money. And we have an enterprise, but they're just making money off of us. And I think the business regulatory needs to really work with the local people. They need to be out there to because nobody wants to go through the business regulatory. There's some of these ridiculous forms that they have to go through. I think we need to revisit them, and I think we need to get a lot of our people to be on priority one. I'm not sure how much you have involved in business regulatory to be part of this ARPA fundings and hire more local and Navajo business owners. Are they out there helping people, helping the business owners? So I think we might be, Chair, I think I'm not sure if Patero can bring business regulatory to tell us how much you're helping the local people to get on board to use this fundings, ARPA fundings. See what kind of restriction they have. The local contractors, they don't want to go through business regulatory. Or maybe we could have them on present to the Budget and Finance Committee. Chair, thank you.
With that, back to you, Mr. Templatero. Response.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I will get together with the director for Business Regulatory Department. He's the one that helped us set up some of the budgets for the ARPA Administrative Regulatory Support one. So I work very well with him. I will see. They have one position that they got funded through this. So the contracts that are going through for ARPA for business regulatory, they're out in a matter of hours, not days anymore. So things get out very quickly with that shop already. All we got to do is replicate that with the other service providers that were provided these funds. So I will go on ahead and do a follow-up with them and then see if perhaps we can have that individual work with I can't speak for them, but I will make a recommendation to see if that person that's hired underneath ARPA can perhaps facilitate the process of getting people signed on as priority 1 and priority 2 businesses. So thank you for your recommendations.
Thank you for your response. Back to the committee. Any further questions, comments? Anthony, I'll call for the question to accept the report. Ramona, if you would lead us a roll call vote to accept the report.
Yes, Chairman Hino, roll call vote. Roll call vote on accepting the report. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote? Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote? Honorable Jamil here, how do you vote?
I'll vote green. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Jamil here votes green. Honorable Amber Kenneth-Carty, how do you vote?
President Delegate Carty, vote green.
Thank you. Honorable Amber Kenneth-Carty votes green. Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote? Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote?
Delegate Brown votes in favor.
Thank you. Honorable Nathaniel Brown votes in favor. Honorable Elmer P. Begay, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you. Honorable Elmer P. Begay votes green. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote?
Vice Chair Smith votes green by text, via text.
Okay, thank you, Peggy. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr. votes green via text. Chairman, we have 5 members voting in the affirmative, 0 opposing. Chairman not voting. Chairman?
Okay, thank you for that. 5 in favor, 0 opposed, chair not voting. Thanks a lot, Mr. Platero, for your presence here and to give us information on the report. With that, moving forward to update on FY23 budget process. Mr. Dominic Bial, we did just pass the BIM legislation. So, Mr. Bial, do you have anything more to add?
Mr. Chair, committee members, as Chairman Hino mentioned, the budget process matter, including the revenue projections, the planning allocations to the various cost groups, and then the budget instructions manual with 2 amendments was passed less than an hour ago. So with that, we're off and running. Navajo Nation government is officially in budget development process. So later today, or might go into tomorrow, we'll be making the corrections, revisions to the BIM pursuant to the two amendments. And then getting, arranging it for the BIM to be printed so that our programs, divisions, and branches have copies, as well as the timetable. Mr. Chair, that's all I have to add at this point. Thank you.
Kushina Hiana, Mr. Biel, for that short, brief report. With that, Shenandoah Budget and Finance Committee, is there a motion to accept the report?
Delegate Yellowhair.
Shenandoah Delegate Jimmy Yellowhair, motions to accept the report. Is there a second?
Second, Delegate Begay.
Kushina Shenandoah Delegate Elmer P. Begay, second. So with that, any questions for Mr. Biel? Tanoia, I'll call for the question. Ramona, if you'd lead us a roll call vote to accept the report.
Sure, Chairman, you can do a roll call vote on accepting the report. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote? Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote? Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair, how do you vote? Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair, how do you vote? Honorable Amber Kenneth-Bott Crotty, how do you vote? Honorable Amber Kenneth-Bott Crotty, how do you vote? Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote?
Delegate Brown votes in favor.
Thank you. Honorable Nathaniel Brown votes in favor. Honorable Elmer P. Begay, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you. Honorable Elmer P. Begay votes green. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote?
Vice Chair Smith votes green via text.
Thank you. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr. votes green via text. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair, how do you vote?
I vote green. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair votes green. Honorable Amber Kenneth-Bott Crotty, how do you vote?
This is Delegate Cardi, I vote green.
Thank you, Shadeja. Honorable Amber Kenneth-Bott Crotty votes green. Chairman, we have 5 members voting in the affirmative or opposing. Chairman not voting. Chairman.
Thank you for that roll call vote. We have 5 in favor, 0 opposed, chair not voting. So with that, we have accepted the report. Thank you, Mr. Biel. Last on our report listing is update on ARPA Hardship Assistance Program presented by Ms. Elizabeth Begay, our interim controller, Office of the Controller. Ms. Elizabeth Begay, are you on the line, Madam Controller?
Chair Henio, this is Peggy.
Peggy?
I got an email indicating that Jeremy Ben, the accounting manager over the ARPA funds, or Gerald Shirley, I'm sorry, Gerald Shirley, the accounting manager over the ARPA funds, the hardship assistance project, will be providing the report with the hardship team. Guess he's the leader over there.
Kushina Biga, thank you. With that, Mr. Shirley, are you on the call with us?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that, Peggy. I'm here. Mr. Shirley has to leave for Cayenta in order to do a walkthrough of that check distribution drive that we're scheduled to do this Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. But I'll go ahead and do the report, Mr. Chair.
Hey, thank you, Ms. Begay, our Madam Controller. You may proceed.
Yes, good afternoon, Budget and Finance Committee. I'm here to do a report on the ARPA hardship check run to date. I emailed Peggy the the summary of the check run we did. And based on that summary sheet, we have remaining available of $11,810,600 after we do a reserve of $4,200,000 for those individuals sharing CIB. There's approximately 2,100 Navajos that are sharing CIB, and we're still working with the vital records in resolving this issue. There's also a reserve of $5 million for the check run that we will do this week, and that is for approximately 2,500 CARES recipients that have yet to receive ARPA hardship assistance. So overall, out of the $557 million budgeted for ARPA assistance, there's approximately $545,189,400 that will be expended, leaving $11,810,600 for new applicants and new enrollees. When I say new applicants, those are Navajos that already have their CIB, but did not apply under the CARES funding last year. That's why we consider them as new applicants. And then the new enrollees will be the Navajos that never received a CIB and are just now applying or enrolling to get their CIB. There's approximately 60,000 of them that we anticipate based on vital records information. And based on that, we anticipate we need 120 million additional funding for ARPA hardship to fully assist all enrolled Navajos under the hardship assistance program. And another report I need to do is the scheduled check distribution drive this coming Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at Kayenta School, High School. That's in the auditorium. We're scheduled to be there, and we will be bringing the return checks from the Chinle Agency, the Western Agency, the Northern Agency, as well as those return checks from Utah during the check distribution drive. And we will be there from 9 in the morning up to 4 o'clock for the next 3 days, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And we would like to thank Delegate Brown for arranging this. We are also planning to do other check distribution drive. We're looking at the Telecommun chapter and the surrounding chapters that we will be assisting on those return checks. And of course, other delegates are requesting us to schedule their check distribution drive at their respective chapters. So we're making arrangement on this check distribution drive. That concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Elizabeth Gare, Interim Madam Controller. With that, the Budget and Finance Committee, their motion to accept the report.
Delegate Yellowhair.
Delegate Jimmy Yellowhair motions to accept the report. Is there a second?
Delegate Begay.
Delegate
Brown.
Second, so we'll have floor is open for questions, comments for Ms. Elizabeth Begay. Are there any questions or comments for Ms. Begay? Denoya, we can move to accept the report. Not hearing none. So with this, we'll move forward to accept the report. Ramona, if you'd lead a roll call vote.
Sure, Chairman Henyo, roll call vote on accepting the report. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote? Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote? Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair, how do you vote? Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair, how do you vote? Honorable
I'll vote green.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair votes green. Honorable Amber Kenneth Spot Crotty, how do you vote? Honorable Amber Kenneth Spot Crotty, how do you vote? Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote?
Delegate Brown votes in favor.
Thank you. Honorable Nathaniel Brown votes in favor. Honorable Elmer P. Begay, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you. Honorable Elmer P. Begay votes green. Honorable Amber Kenneth Spot Crotty, how do you vote? Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote?
Vice Chair Smith votes green via text.
Thank you, Peggy. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr. votes green via text. Chairman, we have 4 members voting in the affirmative, 0 opposing. Chairman not voting. Chairman?
Kashikiala, 4 in favor, 0 opposed, chair not voting. We have accepted the report. Thank you, Ms. Elizabeth Begay, for providing the report to the committee. So with that, moving forward on our agenda, we have completed our reports. Old business, there's none. And we are at the close of session, written announcements and adjournment. Are there any, I see any written announcements? So is there a motion to adjourn?
This is Peggy.
Peggy?
Delegate Brown.
Good afternoon, everyone. There was a written announcement that was sent out from the Navajo committee is going to be having a special meeting tomorrow afternoon at 1 o'clock. So the written agenda was sent out this around noonish. So you should all have those in your box. That's my announcement.
Shana, thank you. So that we do have a the Navigated scheduled for tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon. I'm sorry. That is there a motion? I think I heard Delegate Nathaniel Brown motion.
Yellowhair second.
So that motion, that Delegate Nathaniel Brown motion to adjourn, second by Delegate Jimmy Yellowhair. Any further parting word comments? Tenoya, Ramona, if you'd lead us a roll call vote to adjourn. Thank you, Delegate Eugene So for being with us this afternoon. Delegate Odo So and with that, Ramona, roll call vote.
Yes, Chairman Henyo, roll call vote on adjournment. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote? Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote? Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair, how do you vote? Jimmy Yellowhair, how do you vote?
Delegate Yellowhair votes green. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair votes green. Honorable Amber Kenneth Crotty, how do you vote? Honorable Amber Kenneth Crotty, how do you vote? Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote? Thank you. Honorable Nathaniel Brown votes green. Honorable Elmer P. Begay, how do you vote?
I'll vote green.
Thank you. Honorable Elmer P. Begay votes green. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote?
He votes green by via text.
Thank you. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr. votes green via text. Honorable Amber Kenneth Bakrati, how do you vote? Chairman, we have 4 members voting in the affirmative, 0 opposing. Chairman not voting. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. We are hereby adjourned with the vote of 4 in favor, 0 opposed, chair not voting. It is officially adjourned at 2:04 p.m. Again, National Budget and Finance Committee and staff and everybody on the line for listening in. Yeah, have a good afternoon. Be safe out there.
Thank you, everybody. Mr. Yellowhair, Shania, when will you be available to sign the committee report?
I'll be there before 5 today.
Okay, it'll be ready. Thank you. Thank you, everybody,
welcome.
for your participation, for the reports and the legislation. And hope you have a great day. Thank you. Bye.